Chapter 107. As the day of Prince Tup and Miss Vera's wedding approached, the entire Silvermoon City was filled with a festive atmosphere. She was the daughter of the Dukes of the North. Even though she was just an adopted daughter, she was still the daughter of a noble with the highest status in the history of the Maduan royal family. All of the half-elves felt honored to be able to do so. However, this festive atmosphere was suddenly mixed with some unpleasant noises. Some stories about Miss Vera and Viscount Angley quietly spread in Silvermoon City. Moreover, these stories were all real and did not seem to be made up. As a result, the public opinion in Silvermoon City gradually began to change. Under the influence of some people, the half-elves no longer looked forward to Miss Vera marrying into the royal family. They even began to feel that Prince Tup should not marry a noble lady with a tainted reputation. The people of this world also valued a woman's reputation very much. After all, in the absence of paternity testing technology, how could they ensure that their descendants were really of their own blood? This was a problem that was very troublesome. Therefore, in order to ensure the purity of the bloodline, the nobles would generally require the bride to be a virgin. This was the simplest way to ensure the purity of the bloodline, although it was not necessarily effective. In fact, many nobles had to go through a body inspection procedure before they got married. However, this procedure was generally targeted at the woman who was in a weaker position. If Prince Tup was marrying Vera, it was obvious that the House of Medea would not dare to perform a body inspection on Vera. This was because this procedure was simply too rude. When some of the nobles found out that their daughters were pregnant out of wedlock, they would deliberately find a lower-class noble to take over the bride's body in order to prevent the child from being a spurned illegitimate child. For the half-elven royal family, they absolutely did not want to be tainted with a bad reputation. However, if they were really asked to perform a body inspection on Vera, they probably would not have the courage to do so. However, as the rumors gradually fermented and became more and more intense, the House of Medea began to lose control of the situation. Many half-elf nobles even began to ask for Vera's body to be examined. These half-elf nobles even found a very dignified reason. The purpose of the medical examination was not to question Miss Vera's innocence. On the contrary, the purpose of the medical examination was to protect Miss Vera's reputation and to completely destroy these groundless rumors. Half-Elven Palace, Colin's residence. Duke Muller was speechless when he saw Colin reading the rumors that he had collected with great interest. Colin was indeed very happy to see that. He realized that some of these rumors were true, and some were false. Moreover, they were fabricated quite well. For example, they once rode on the same horse. For example, Colin had once risked his life to block a spear for Vera. Another example was that after the two of them met at the Mirror Lake, they had accompanied each other all the way and had developed a good impression of each other. There were even rumors that when Vera married into the half-elf kingdom, Colin had specially asked the Duke to appoint him as the messenger so that he could personally send his beloved woman to a foreign country. In short, if Colin was not the male lead, he might have really believed in such a sad and beautiful love story. Moreover, these rumors also emphasized that he and Vera had been alone together many times. Although it was not explicitly stated, it was constantly hinting that the two of them had developed a relationship that was beyond friendship. Well, this point was indeed true. Colin touched his chin and suddenly laughed. When Duke Muller saw that Colin was still laughing, he could not help but speak up. Viscounts, this matter has now spread all over the city. Many half-elves have even started to organize a demonstration and they are demanding that Miss Vera's body be examined to prove her innocence. Then let's do the examination, Colin replied casually. It was as if there was really nothing between him and Vera. Duke Muller was obviously stunned for a moment. He blinked and asked hesitantly, "Are you sure?" "Of course," Colin said in a loud and righteous voice. "These words that question Miss Vera's innocence are all baseless slander. You can rest assured and arrange for the examination process. As long as the results are out, these rumors will naturally be dispelled." In fact, Colin did not care about these rumors at all. In fact, he even felt that this was a really clumsy plan. If the House of Medea really dared to examine Vera's body and found out that she was not innocent, then Colin could not help but admire the courage of the other party. This was because this was simply a slap in the face to the House of St. Hilda. Colin felt that this was a plan that the silly Prince William had come up with. In order to prevent his younger brother from marrying Vera, Prince William's means were really hard to explain. However, Colin also thought of another possibility, a conspiracy by the Eastern region. The rumors were very likely to be released by the Eastern region in order to force the House of Medea to examine Vera's body and thereby offend the House of St. Hilda. In this way, the half-elf kingdom could only ask the Eastern region for help. Of course, no matter what the truth was, Colin was not too concerned about it. In fact, he actually hoped that Vera would not pass the examination so that the wedding would be ruined. As for whether Vera was innocent or not, Colin had personally examined her body. So, how could he not know? However, just as Colin was thinking about how to take advantage of the situation to destroy the marriage, he heard Duke Muller speak again. "Sir Viscounts, please rest assured that I will arrange a suitable person to examine Miss Vera's body. I will definitely not let Miss Vera be criticized." After seeing Colin's calm performance, Duke Muller believed that there was nothing going on between him and Vera. However, Duke Muller was still not at ease. After all, who knew if Vera had any secret lovers before Colin? This matter was related to the rise of the Miller family. Of course, Duke Muller did not dare to take it lightly. Colin also understood the meaning behind Duke Muller's words and tone, and he suddenly laughed in his heart. This old man was actually preparing to do something behind the scenes. However, this was indeed the best way to deal with the rumors. As long as Vera's body was examined and the result of the examination was controlled, then the rumors would naturally fall apart. Therefore, the person who was going to examine Vera's body was very important. "Who are you going to ask to examine Miss Vera's body?" Duke Muller showed a confident smile on his face. "Please rest assured that we already have the most suitable person in mind. With her identity and status, she will definitely not bring disgrace to Miss Vera." "Who?" "Queen Aisha." Colin was stunned and he immediately understood why Duke Muller said that she was the best candidate. In fact, it did not matter whether Miss Vera was innocent or not. As long as Queen Aisha said that she was innocent, then she would naturally be innocent. What would Queen Aisha say? Was there a need to ask? Who else would want to see Prince Tup marry Vera more than Queen Aisha? Moreover, there was another advantage to asking Queen Aisha to examine Miss Vera's body. That was, there was no need to worry that Prince William would raise any objections to the person who was going to examine Miss Vera's body. If it was someone else, Prince William would definitely be worried that Duke Muller would do something behind the scenes. He might even ask for someone else to examine Miss Vera's body. However, if it was Queen Aisha, then there would definitely be no problem. In terms of identity and status, was there anyone more suitable than Queen Aisha to examine Miss Vera's body? Duke Muller felt that such a response would be foolproof. Therefore, he hurriedly said goodbye to Colin before he ran excitedly to prepare for the examination. Colin looked at the back of the other party and suddenly thought of the beautiful queen consort who was surrounded by the blood roses. He also thought of the words that she had said at that time. Colin shook his head and threw that beautiful figure out of his mind. The examination this time was just a formality. Colin was not prepared to change his plan because of it. Now, he was just waiting for the Knight of Rigo to lead the Angeli family's army to Silvermoon City. Calculating the time, they should be arriving soon. As for Colin's plan, it was about time to begin. Chapter 108. The body examination would be held 3 days before the wedding. As expected, the person who would perform the body examination on Miss Vera was Queen Aisha. Although the King and Prince William were not satisfied with this candidate, they could not find a more suitable candidate. Naturally, the location of the body examination was Queen Consort's palace. It was a private and solemn place. When Colin led Vera into the palace, he found that all the high-level officials of the half-elf kingdom were already there. There was an oval bed in the middle of the palace. The bed was neatly covered with dark purple silk. The pillow was a light beige color with rose patterns embroidered on it. It looked dignified and elegant. There was an opaque curtain around the bed. It was probably specially prepared for today's body examination. Colin suspected that when the curtain was closed, Queen Aisha would not even need Vera to take off her clothes before she announced that she was innocent. Is there a need for so many people? Vera looked at the half-elf nobles in the room and frowned. She was a little speechless. Okay, why don't we all leave and let Her Highness Queen Consort perform the body examination on Miss Vera alone? Your Majesty, what do you think? Duke Muller asked the sleepy king. The old king opened his sleepy eyes and seemed to have just come to his senses. He nodded slowly and said, Okay. Okay, we'll do as you say. I want to stay, the Knights of Telda said immediately. The Knight of the House of St. Hilda had never left Vera's side. Of course, that was except for the night at the Red Maple Manor. Duke Muller was stunned for a moment before he said, Okay, then we will have to trouble the Knights of Telda. He then looked at Prince Tup and said, Your Highness, why don't you stay and entertain the guests? Prince Tup naturally did not refuse. Okay. Then I will stay too, Colin said immediately. Everyone had a strange look in their eyes, but they didn't say anything. Prince William seemed to want to stay as well, but he did not have a good excuse to do so. After all, unlike Colin and Ted, he was not responsible for Vera's safety, and unlike his younger brother, he was not Vera's fiancé. Thus, he could only support the old king and walk out with the rest of the half-elf nobles. From Prince William's point of view, this body examination was just a formality. Would Queen Aisha say that Vera was not innocent? The Earl of Avon's plan was so easily neutralized. Prince William suddenly realized that the Earl of Avon's plan was too perfunctory. After everyone had left the palace, Queen Aisha invited Vera and the others to take a seat before she said, Come on, let's have a cup of scented tea to relax your mind. Thank you, Your Highness Queen Consort. Colin also sat down at the round table and drank the scented tea that Queen Aisha had personally brewed for him as he looked around Queen Consort's palace. The overall layout of the palace was not deliberately luxurious. Instead, it had a refreshing and elegant style. In addition to the bed in the middle of the palace, there was only a sandalwood wardrobe near the wall and a dressing table near the window. In addition to a jewelry box and toiletries, there was also a pot of blood rose on the table. Your Highness Queen Consort, that blood rose is really beautiful. Vera could not help but exclaim when she saw the pot of blood rose. Indeed, although Colin had seen a lot of blood roses in the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce and the Royal Garden, it was obvious that none of them could be compared to the one in front of him. That blooming posture and that beautiful color made it seem like a burning flame that was consuming its own life just to leave a trace of beauty in this world. Yes, it is really beautiful. Queen Aisha also sighed. She slowly walked to the window and reached out to touch the blooming blood rose with a proud look on her face. This flower was personally cultivated by me. You are really amazing. Vera could not help but exclaim. This flower is Mother's treasure. Prince Tup also laughed and said, My naughty little nephew, Charlie, once accidentally plucked a petal from this flower. As a result, Mother smacked his buttocks and he was bedridden for 10 days. Queen Aisha smiled and shook her head, That kid still hates me because of this. A few days ago, he even ruined the blood roses that I planted in the garden. Prince Tup quickly said, Mother, don't worry. I will go to the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce tomorrow and ask Sith to send you some more blood roses. Queen Aisha shook her head and said, There is no need. Prince Tup suddenly felt puzzled and just as he was about to ask why, Queen Consort suddenly said, Do you know why this blood rose is so beautiful? Why? Vera asked curiously. Colin suddenly remembered the method of cultivating the blood roses that Queen Aisha had told him before. He smiled and interrupted, "Don't tell me that this blood rose was watered with the blood of a knight?" Queen Aisha glanced at Colin with her big charming eyes and chuckled, "Yes. And it is not just blood." Colin frowned and suddenly felt that Queen Aisha's state seemed a little strange today. "Not just blood, what else is there?" Queen Elsa leaned against the windowsill. The bright sunlight shone in from outside the window, covering her with a layer of godlike halo. Today, she was wearing a silver low-cut dress with slim shoulders, showing off her curvaceous figure without a doubt. Her face was also obviously carefully dressed up. Her pink cheeks and soft red lips, together with the gorgeous blood roses, exuded a breathtaking beauty. Queen Aisha smiled when she heard Colin's question. "And, the head?" "What?" The other 4 people in the room were shocked by this answer. Prince Tup smiled awkwardly and said, "Mother, what nonsense are you talking about?" Queen Aisha smiled brightly and suddenly the whole palace seemed to be illuminated by such a bright smile. "I am not talking nonsense." Colin's strange feeling was getting stronger and stronger. The half-elf queen consort in front of him was very strange. Vera seemed to have realized something and quickly changed the topic. "Your Highness, why don't we start the body inspection? It is not good to let the others wait outside for too long." Queen Aisha did not move and was still caressing the blood rose's petals. Her tone became a little uncertain. "I am not talking nonsense. If you do not believe me, you can break the flower pot and see if there is the head." "Mother." Prince Tup stood up suddenly, as if he wanted to stop Queen Consort who was talking nonsense. But as soon as he stood up, he swayed and it was as if he was going to fall to the ground in the next second. The Knights of Telda saw Prince Tup's condition and were suddenly frightened. They immediately stood up and touched the sword at their waist. At the same time, they wobbled and reminded him. "The tea, there is a problem with the tea." Colin blinked and also realized that the situation was not right. However, he did not panic too much. He had already experimented with it and he was immune to poison. Moreover, he did not feel any discomfort until now. Bang! On the other side, Prince Tup had already fallen to the ground. After that, Knight Ted did not hold on for long. He wobbled and fell to the ground. Vera, on the other hand, was already lying on the table, unconscious. Facing such a situation, Colin sighed secretly and quickly closed his eyes and leaned back. Bang! He fell to the ground. Chapter 109. Lying on the cold marble floor, Colin quietly opened his eyes and peeked outside. Then, he saw Queen Aisha opening the drawer of the dressing table indifferently and taking out a dagger. What is she trying to do? Colin's heart was in turmoil. He did not expect the situation in front of him at all. Originally, he thought that it would be an ordinary body inspection procedure. He thought that Queen Aisha would not lift Vera's skirt and directly declare her innocence. Then, the wedding would proceed as planned. He could also start to implement his plan. But now, the script was completely messed up. Queen Aisha was approaching Vera step by step. At the same time, she raised the dagger in her hand and seemed like she was going to stab her. She was going to kill Vera. But why? Colin could not figure it out. However, this did not prevent him from immediately jumping up from the ground and pushing Queen Aisha to the ground. He grabbed the dagger in Queen Consort's hand with one hand and covered her mouth with the other to prevent her from screaming. Who ordered you to do this? Colin stared coldly into Queen Aisha's eyes. Queen Aisha's eyes flashed with obvious surprise. She was obviously wondering why Colin did not faint. But soon, this trace of surprise was replaced by calmness. No, it was not calmness. It was a dead silence. It was as if she was a person who had reached the end of her life and was no longer attached to anything in the world. Colin suddenly found that his hand that was covering Queen Aisha's mouth was wet. He thought that it was saliva, but when he took a closer look, he found that, a stream of blood was oozing out from between his fingers. "Are you poisoned too?" Colin asked in surprise. But after thinking about it, he wondered. "No, you did not drink the tea at all." Blood continued to flow out of Queen Aisha's mouth. Colin no longer needed to cover her mouth because Queen Consort was already gasping for air. She could not scream even if she wanted to. "She is just unconscious, she will not die," Queen Aisha said intermittently. She even had the heart to remind Colin, "I failed, you, take her away, tell me, who ordered you to do this?" Colin only cared about the mastermind behind the scenes. Queen Aisha smiled sadly and did not answer Colin's question. Instead, she turned her head and looked at the blood rose. There is my true lover's head there. Did Duke Muller ask you to do this?" Colin did not care. "Or was to ask you to ask Sith from the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce." However, Queen Elsa had already closed her eyes. "Damn it! Don't die." Colin was depressed. If Queen Aisha died like this, how was he going to explain it when he went out later? Also, who was the mastermind behind this strange incident? Who was the one who wanted to kill Vera? Moreover, the person who ordered Queen Aisha to kill Vera was the one who wanted to kill her. Who had such an ability? Colin looked at Queen Aisha, who had completely stopped moving. He suddenly remembered that Sith had told him that Queen Consort was also a knight. Although her rank was not high, she was still a knight. So, Colin no longer hesitated and immediately bit Queen Aisha's white and slender neck. As the blood-red smoke gradually dissipated, Colin also raised his head from Queen Aisha's body. His face was still a little pale. He reached out his hand to check if Queen Aisha was still breathing. Colin was relieved. It seemed that the embrace ceremony was a success. After becoming a blood descendant, Queen Aisha had already gained the ability to be immune to poison. This way, she would not die and Colin would have the opportunity to learn from her who was the mastermind behind all this. Seeing that Queen Aisha did not show any signs of waking up, Colin temporarily suppressed the countless questions in his heart. He stood up and walked to the side of the Knights of Telda. Colin remembered that this knight of the House of St. Hilda was a fourth-order knight. Chi! Colin cut open the wrist of the Knights of Telda with his sword and let the blood slowly flow into the teacup. At this time, Colin suddenly discovered a fact that made him extremely shocked: he did not lose his rank. Shouldn't he lose his rank after the embrace? Colin carefully felt his own body. Although he was still a little weak, he was still a third-order knight. Could it be? Colin suddenly thought of a possibility. When he first embraced Knight Seal, his rank was lower than Seal's. And this Queen Aisha's knight rank was obviously lower than Colin's. So, could it be that the embrace of a low-order knight would not lose his rank, but only a high-order knight? Colin was a little excited about this discovery. In this way, as long as his knight rank was raised, he would not have to worry about losing his rank every time he embraced her. He thought again, if the other party's rank was the same as his, would she lose her rank? Maybe he would need to experiment further. Seeing the blood of the Knights of Telda gradually filling the teacup, Colin immediately picked it up and brought it to his mouth. Gulp, gulp, feeling his body gradually heating up, Colin closed his eyes comfortably. But just as Colin was enjoying the pleasure of increasing his strength, Prince William's voice suddenly came from outside. "Miss Vera, Your Highness Queen Consort, are you done?" Colin was shocked, and he was thinking about how to send this guy away when he saw that Queen Aisha had already woken up. Her eyes seemed to be a little confused. She had obviously taken the poison in advance, so how was she still alive? She turned her head to look at Colin, and then, she could not help but have the thought of obeying him. Let him go. Colin tried to order Queen Aisha. Queen Aisha nodded and shouted outside, "Miss Vera and I are tasting tea, please wait a little longer." Prince William did not suspect anything and quickly replied, "Okay. You can rest assured that no one will disturb you." After sending Prince William away, Queen Aisha turned her head to look at Colin and asked in confusion, "Why am I not dead?" Colin put away the water skin calmly and walked to Queen Elsa. He looked down at her with infinite piety and respect on his face as he asked calmly, "What are you doing? Have you heard of the Blood Angel?" Outside the palace, Prince William passed on Queen Aisha's words. The old king squinted his eyes and said weakly, "Since that is the case, I will go back to rest first. You can wait here, and let me know when the results are out." The rest of the half-elf nobles nodded naturally. After the old king left with the help of the maid, a half-elf female slave suddenly walked in front of the palace. Yes, it's you, come here," Duke Muller shouted. The slave girl shrank her head as she walked over. "Whose slave are you? Why are you running around? Didn't anyone teach you the rules?" "Sir, I am Viscount Angley's slave," Kathy replied carefully. Duke Muller had wanted to break the legs of this slave who did not know the rules, but he stopped when he heard Viscount Angley. Prince William also recognized Kathy at this moment and nodded, "Yes, she is my gift to Viscount Angley. She just entered the palace not long ago and does not know the rules." Duke Muller snorted and reprimanded, "Get out. If I see you running around the palace again, I will break your legs." "Yes." Kathy was so scared that her face turned pale, and she hurriedly turned to leave. After walking far away, Kathy carefully turned her head back and looked at Queen Consort's palace, which was as quiet as ever, with a puzzled expression. But after that, she forcefully suppressed this doubt and quickened her pace. Chapter 110. The bright sun shone through the window and shone on Colin and Queen Aisha, who was kneeling on the ground. From afar, it looked like an oil painting of pilgrimage. Queen Aisha raised her head slightly and looked up at the man who had just given her a new life. Her heart was full of respect and admiration. Although she had never heard of the name, Blood Angel Dracula, she believed in Colin's words. After all, this was the person who had just pulled her back from the abyss of death. Other than the angel apostles and the God's chosen ones, who else could have such great power? The suppression from Colin's bloodline was also mistaken by Queen Aisha as the holy aura of the God's chosen ones. "So, Aisha Miller, are you willing to become my family and contribute your strength to the mysterious mission of the Blood Angel?" "I'm willing," Queen Isaac replied with a pious expression. When Colin saw this, he could not help but sigh. The brainwashing ability of religion was too powerful. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with taking advantage of the church and stealing from the God of Light. At least until his strength was above the church, he would continue to use this method to control the blood descendants. However, he believed that one day, he would no longer need to rely on the so-called Blood Angel, the so-called God's chosen ones, and let the true name of the blood descendants appear in the world. Of course, before that, he still needed to keep a low profile. Very good. Colin stretched out his hand and touched Queen Aisha's forehead as if he was completing some kind of inheritance ceremony. "In the name of the God of Light and the Blood Angel, I accept your loyalty and give you the blood grace. I hope you will live up to this honor." Queen Aisha closed her eyes as if she was bathed in some kind of holy light. Her face was full of devotion and fanaticism. When the other party gradually calmed down, Colin withdrew his finger and asked, "Tell me, who sent you to assassinate Vera?" Queen Aisha opened her eyes and answered without hesitation, "It was Sith." "Sith from the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce?" "Yes." This answer was within Colin's expectations. He had already sensed that Queen Consort had some sort of connection with Sith. However, what he was puzzled about was why Sith wanted to assassinate Vera. What he couldn't figure out was why Queen Aisha would listen to the orders of a small merchant. Looking at Queen Aisha's beautiful face, Colin asked the question in his heart. "God's chosen one, the reason why I killed Vera was because I wanted to take revenge on the House of Medea and the Miller family." Hearing this, Colin suddenly thought of something. He raised his finger and pointed at the bright red blood rose by the window and asked, "Just because of the head buried there?" "Yes." The head of the person I once loved is buried there. Colin had already guessed the reason why Queen Aisha hated the House of Medea and the Miller family. So, he nodded and said, "Tell me your story." "Yes." Queen Aisha's blue eyes flashed with sadness. "Before I married into the half-elf royal family, I had a true love. He was born in a small noble family in Silvermoon City. Later, his family declined and he became a wandering knight. After that, he was taken in by my father and became a knight of the Miller family. After knowing that we were in love, my father was very angry. How could he allow his daughter to marry a fallen knight? So, my father chased him away and found a more powerful husband for me. Yes, it was His Majesty the half-elf king. Of course, I didn't want to marry an old man who was more than 70 years old. So, I started to cry and make a fuss. I didn't eat or drink to protest. But I didn't expect that my father would kill my lover and send his head to me. He warned me that if I didn't marry into the royal family, he would chop off my head." At this point, Queen Aisha's breathing became hurried. Her chest rose and fell violently, and her eyes were filled with fear and hatred. She paused for a while before continuing. "Under my father's pressure, I could only marry the old king. But from then on, I only had an unforgettable hatred for him. In order to please the king, in order to gain his own power, he actually treated his own daughter like this. On the day of my marriage, I secretly swore that I would definitely make him pay the price. I buried my lover's head in the flower pot of the blood rose and made him accompany me day and night, reminding me not to forget this hatred." Hearing this, Colin couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This woman was really ruthless. Placing her lover's head beside her. If this happened to an ordinary person, they would probably have nightmares all night. When I was painstakingly looking for an opportunity to take revenge, a merchant found me. That's right, it's Sith from the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. I got to know him through the blood rose. Their Chamber of Commerce was able to cultivate the best blood roses in Silvermoon City. Thus, they became the exclusive supplier of the royal garden and frequently entered the palace. I don't know how he found out about my story, but he hinted that he could help me. Of course, I wouldn't easily trust a merchant, until he showed me something. What was it? The Savoy family's badge. Savoy. Colin felt like he had heard of this family before. Queen Aisha patiently explained, the Savoy family used to be the half-elf royal family, but they were chased off the throne by the House of Medea in a coup 300 years ago. Colin nodded as he finally understood the situation. His previous guess was right. Sith was indeed a noble. Moreover, he used to be the half-elf royal family. If that was the case, then the half-elf female slave that Prince William gave to him, Kathy, probably also had the surname Savoy. Queen Aisha continued, after seeing the Savoy family's badge, I was convinced that Sith could be trusted because we are all vengeful people. So, after Miss Vera came to Silvermoon City, Sith came to me again and asked me to find a chance to kill Vera. Colin also guessed Sith's purpose at this time. He blurted out, he wants the House of Medea to suffer the wrath of the northern frontier. Yes. Queen Aisha nodded. Sith told me that as long as Vera died in the palace, the House of Medea would be completely finished. The same goes for the Miller family. They would all be burned to ashes by the wrath of the Duke of St. Hilda. Hearing this, Colin sneered and added, Sith, as the descendant of the half-elf royal Savoy family, could take the opportunity to rise again and even ascend to the throne. Queen Aisha nodded. Yes, that was his purpose. However, I didn't care at that time. Because what I wanted was revenge. As for what would become of Silvermoon City and whose hands it would fall into, I didn't care. Even if Sith ascended to the throne, he would only be a puppet. When the army of the North enters Silvermoon City, the real ruler of the city will be. Colin suddenly froze when he said this. This was because he suddenly thought of a possibility. He originally thought that the mastermind behind this assassination was Sith Savoy. But now, He felt that it might be someone else. As the saying goes, the greater the prophet, the more suspicious. If Vera was really assassinated, who would be the one who would benefit the most? Sith. Even if he ascended to the throne, he would only be a puppet. And the one who could take the opportunity to control the half-elf kingdom was, the Duke of St. Hilda. Chapter 111. The sunlight outside the window was very good. It shone into the room and sprinkled on the orange-yellow teak floor, reflecting a faint halo. Vera was sleeping soundly on the round table as she bathed in the warm sunlight. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and even her cute little dimples were revealed. She seemed to be having a good dream. However, such a beautiful scene could not warm Colin's heart. This was because he had now guessed that the Duke of St. Hilda was behind Sith. This cruel and merciless Dukes of the North did not hesitate to sacrifice his own adopted daughter in order to get an excuse to enter Silvermoon City. Of course, this did not surprise Colin too much. After all, Vera was not the biological daughter of the Duke of St. Hilda. Not to mention, Vera was also a serious threat to the inheritance rights of the Duke of St. Hilda's biological sons. Charles had already been destroyed. Adams had also died in the Lion's Roar fortress. There was only one Joyce left. Perhaps, when the Duke of St. Hilda saw Adams die in front of him, he had already made up his mind to send Vera on her way. Colin suddenly understood why the Duke of St. Hilda had sent him as the messenger to send Vera off. This was probably the last bit of conscience that he had left. After all, Vera was his adopted daughter. They had been together for more than 10 years. It was impossible for the Duke to have no feelings for her at all. The Duke of St. Hilda had sent Colin as the messenger to send Vera off because he wanted her beloved man to accompany her on the last journey of her life. This also explained why the Knights of Telda were so cooperative and created an opportunity for Vera and Colin to meet alone. So, that was actually the last shot before his death. Colin took a few deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. The anger of a weak person was useless. He understood that he could not compete with the Duke of St. Hilda alone. Allies. He needed allies. Then, an arrogant figure appeared in his mind, Marquis Garcia. To fight against the Duke of St. Hilda, Colin had to work with Marquis Garcia. Thinking of this, Colin suddenly had an idea. The current situation made him realize that perhaps his previous plan could be modified a little more perfectly. Aisha, you don't have to kill Vera. I can help you exact your revenge. Furthermore, you won't have to pay with your life. Are you willing to cooperate with me? Hearing Colin's words, Queen Aisha nodded obediently. You gave me a new life and gave me a new mission. Therefore, I will listen to your arrangements, Lord Chosen One. Looking at Queen Aisha, who was like a completely different person from before, Colin couldn't help but sigh inwardly at how powerful this brainwashing technique was. Alright, this is what you'll do next. Outside the palace, the half-elf nobles who had been waiting for a long time were about to fall asleep. However, because of Queen Aisha's previous warning, they did not dare to disturb them. Some of them had already begun to complain in their hearts. It was just a body examination, not XX. Was there a need for such a long foreplay? Ah! A scream suddenly came out from the bedroom, startling the sleepy people outside. Duke Muller's expression changed drastically and he shouted, "It's Queen Aisha's voice." After saying that, he immediately ran towards the bedroom. The rest of the crowd quickly followed. However, when they reached the door of the bedroom, they stopped and did not know whether they should barge in or not. Duke Muller shouted inside, "Your Highness, what happened?" Queen Aisha did not answer, but she kept screaming. At the same time, there were sounds of fierce fighting. Duke of Lute drew his sword and said decisively, "Something happened inside, we have to go in." Duke Muller also nodded in agreement. Prince William hesitated for a moment before he nodded and shouted, "Miss Vera, Your Highness Queen Consort, we are coming in." However, Just as they were about to rush in, they saw Queen Aisha rushing out with blood all over her body. "Your Highness." Everyone was about to step forward and ask what happened, but they saw another figure chasing after Queen Aisha. It was Prince Tup. However, Prince Tup was very strange at this time. He was holding a long sword covered in blood and was chasing after Queen Aisha. When Duke Muller saw this scene, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He immediately shouted, "Tup! What are you doing? Stop!" However, Prince Tup did not pay any attention to Duke Muller. He was still staring at Queen Aisha with bloodshot eyes. "Tup, you are courting death." The Duke of Lut roared, and the long sword in his hand emitted a dazzling holy light as he slashed at Prince Tup. Boom! The marble floor exploded, and a large number of stones sputtered like bullets. Many of them hit Prince Tup, causing him to be covered in bruises. However, the Duke of Lut's sword was more of a warning. Otherwise, with his strength as a fourth-rank knight, he would have been able to kill Prince Tup in a second. Duke Muller took the opportunity to rush in front of Prince Tup and shouted, "Tup! What are you doing? Put down your sword." In fact, Duke Muller's actions were more to protect Prince Tup. Unfortunately, Prince Tup seemed to have gone completely crazy at this time. He directly slashed his sword at Duke Muller in front of him. Clang! Duke Muller blocked Prince Tup's sword, but his heart sank. At this time, Queen Aisha, who had escaped from danger, suddenly turned around and shouted at the top of her lungs, "Kill him! I order you to kill him!" Prince William looked at all of this in a daze. He did not understand the situation at all. He quickly asked, "Your Highness Queen Consort, what happened inside? Why did Tup become like this? He is crazy, he is crazy." Queen Aisha cried out with blood and tears on her face. "He killed Miss Vera." Boom! Queen Aisha's last sentence was like a sudden clap of thunder, and all the high-ranking half-elf officials present were stunned. Vera is dead? Prince Tup killed her. If this did not come from the mouth of Queen Aisha, who was covered in blood, everyone would have thought that this was a joke. However, they could not laugh now. Under the bright sunshine, they felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. It's over. The Miller family is over. The House of Medea is over. The half-elf kingdom is over. Ah! I will kill you, you bastard! Duke Muller roared as he waved the sword in his hand. He no longer held back and slashed at Prince Tup's vital points. It was as if this was the only way to alleviate the fear in his heart. Dong! 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 The Duke of Lut raised a steel shield and charged towards Prince Tup like a strong rhinoceros. Boom! Prince Tup spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying and slammed into the wall of the palace. However, such a heavy blow did not make him lose his mobility. He stood up again and let out a terrifying roar that didn't sound like a human's. Then, he waved the long sword in his hand and charged toward Queen Elsa again. It was as if he would not stop until he achieved his goal. You are courting death. The Duke of Lut was completely furious. Boom! Prince Tup was sent flying again. However, the Duke of Lut did not let him go this time. He chased after him and stepped on his chest. Crack! Prince Tup finally calmed down and a large amount of blood oozed out of his mouth. It was not until this time that everyone noticed that Colin had appeared at the entrance of the palace. In his arms, he was holding Vera, who was covered in blood. Chapter 112. N. Viscount Angley, Miss Vera, she, Prince William looked at the man with a cold expression and suddenly felt his heart palpitate. However, he still braced himself and asked carefully. Colin did not answer. Instead, he slowly swept his cold gaze across everyone present and finally stopped at Prince Tup, who was lying on the ground. He must be buried with her, Colin ordered in an unquestionable tone. The Duke of Loot gritted his teeth and waved the long sword in his hand. Chi! He cut off Prince Tup's head. The Duke Muller's face twitched a few times but he did not say anything. The other half-elf nobles also looked away as they could not bear to watch. However, at the same time, they were all secretly hoping in their hearts, Prince Tup should be buried with her. That should be enough, right? Colin knew that Prince Tup was dead when he felt that the connection between them had been completely severed. It seemed that blood slaves would die after their heads were cut off. Colin was still in the mood to record the experimental data. Of course, on the surface, he still looked as if he wanted to kill all the half-elves in Silvermoon City so that they could be buried with Vera. Your Excellency Viscount Angley. William still wanted to ask what had happened. However, Colin did not give him the chance at all. He carried Vera's corpse and strode away. The Duke of Loot quietly walked to Prince William and whispered, "Your Highness, you can't let them leave like this." This. Prince William had a panicked look on his face. He didn't know what to do. The Duke of Loot was disappointed and was about to order the guards to stop Colin when Queen Aisha said, "Send someone to keep an eye on them as long as they do not leave the palace. We should go and find His Majesty immediately." Right. Prince William seemed to have grasped at a life-saving straw. "We'll do as you say. We'll immediately go and find Father." The Duke of Loot had no choice but to obey. On the other hand, Colin was returning to his residence. When the guards of the House of St. Hilda saw Vera, who was covered in blood, and they did not know if she was dead or alive, their eyes instantly turned red. It was as though they were about to turn into beasts that were about to devour their prey. "Lord Viscounts, what happened?" "Miss Vera, she..." one of the bodyguards asked as he stepped forward. Colin did not answer his question. Instead, he instructed, "Gather everyone and guard the surroundings of the side hall. No one is allowed to come near." "Yes." "Also, the Knights of Telda are seriously injured and still unconscious in Queen Consort's palace. Send someone to bring him back. When he wakes up, tell him to look for me immediately." "Yes." "Send someone back to Winter City to send a message." Colin gritted his teeth as he tried to squeeze out a tear. "Miss Vera has been killed by Tup Miller." "What?" The bodyguards were shocked by the cruel news. In the next second, they could no longer control the anger in their hearts. They drew their swords and shouted, "Revenge for Miss Vera! Revenge! Revenge!" Colin looked at the agitated bodyguards and quickly stopped them. "Of course, we want revenge. However, we can't make the half-elf pay the price with just a few of us. So, your task now is to send the news back to Winter City and wait for the Northern Frontier Army to come to Silvermoon City." The bodyguards calmed down and began to carry out Colin's previous orders. Colin breathed a sigh of relief and strode into the room. As soon as he closed the door, he saw the half-elf female slave that Prince William had sent to him earlier walking towards him in shock. "Lord Viscounts, Miss Vera, she is really..." Looking at Kathy, who was quickly approaching him, it seemed as though she wanted to see if Vera was really dead. Colin stared at her and shouted, "Stop right there, Kathy Savoy." Kathy was stunned when she heard Colin calling out her true identity. Colin took the opportunity to walk to the bed and placed Vera's body on the bed. Lord. Kathy seemed as though she wanted to explain herself. Colin did not even turn around. He just said coldly, "I am not in the mood to play undercover games with you right now. So, you better be smart. Otherwise, killing you will be as easy as stepping on an ant." Kathy shrank her head and did not dare to speak anymore. "Go and find a coffin." "Yes, Lord." Kathy felt as though she had been granted amnesty and she quickly ran out of the room. However, Colin's actions also made her certain that Vera was really dead. When she reached a corner where no one was looking, Kathy quietly took out a green bamboo from her clothes and threw it on the ground. After a while, the bamboo started to burn quietly. There was no dazzling fire, only a faint green smoke. Wisps of smoke continuously floated into the air. In the king's bedroom, a group of half-elf nobles were holding their breaths as they listened to Queen Aisha's narration. As soon as I finished telling them the results of the body examination, Prince Tup suddenly pulled out his sword and stabbed Miss Vera. We did not even have time to react. What is the result of the body examination? Suddenly, one of the half-elf nobles asked. Queen Aisha did not answer, and it seemed as though she felt that this was a stupid question. Her silence also made everyone understand that Vera was no longer a virgin. However, could it be that Prince Tup suddenly went crazy because of this and wanted to kill Vera? That was too inconceivable. If Queen Aisha had not said this personally, and if everyone had not seen Prince Tup's madness with their own eyes, no one would have believed such a ridiculous statement. However, the truth seemed to be so ridiculous. Why did you tell them the results of the body examination? Duke Muller suddenly questioned Queen Aisha. Queen Aisha smiled coldly. Duke, do you want me to lie? Why not? Duke Muller said without thinking, and it seemed as though he was going crazy. He never expected that his daughter would betray the family like this. Duke Muller could not understand Prince Tup's behavior at all. If you are not a virgin, then so be it. Do you have to draw your sword and kill someone? When they saw that Duke Muller dared to openly ask Queen Aisha to lie, none of the half-elf nobles reprimanded him. In fact, many of them secretly agreed with him. If Queen Aisha had told a small lie, at least the situation would not have gotten out of hand. Weren't Viscount Angley and the Knights of Telda present at that time? Could they not have stopped Tup? The Duke of Lut suddenly questioned. Because Tup poisoned the tea, we all became dizzy and our fighting strength was greatly reduced. Queen Aisha decisively threw the blame to the Duke of Lut. Didn't you prepare the tea yourself? How could Tup poison it? How would I know? Also, the tea was prepared by the maidservants, not me. Are you saying that Tup bribed your maidservants? It's possible. That means that he had already poisoned the tea before the test results came out. Perhaps he had already guessed that this would happen. But that doesn't warrant killing. You'll have to ask Tup about that. Enough. The old king roared and interrupted the confrontation between the Duke of Lut and Queen Aisha. His chest heaved up and down violently, as if he would faint in the next second. The most important thing right now is to immediately seal off the news. Everyone present, without my permission, is not allowed to divulge today's matter. Duke of Lut, immediately bring people to seal off the city gates. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Yes. The Duke of Lut immediately obeyed. But when he raised his head, he saw that the old king's eyes had rolled back and he had fainted. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! The hall was instantly thrown into chaos. Chapter 113. At the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. In the garden filled with blood roses, Sith was staring at the sea of flowers in front of him in a daze. A maid approached him carefully and asked, "My lord, do you need something to eat?" Sith waved his hand impatiently. The maid hurriedly and quietly retreated. Sith paced back and forth in the pavilion, his expression becoming more and more anxious as time passed. Just as the sun was about to set, an attendant hurriedly ran into the garden and reported, "Sir, I saw the green smoke in the palace." Sith stared and asked anxiously, "Are you sure?" "Yes, my lord. I swear on my family's honor." "Good." Sith clapped his hands excitedly and ordered, "Send someone to inform Winter City immediately." "Be quick." "Yes, my lord." Half-Elven Palace. A group of half-elven nobles had already left in a panic. Queen Consort had also gone back to bathe and change out of her blood-stained clothes. Only Prince William and the unconscious king were left in the empty palace. However, after Prince William dismissed the servants around him, the unconscious king suddenly opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. Prince William pulled a long face and hurriedly asked, "Your Majesty, now what should we do?" The king glared at his son and said calmly, "What are you panicking for? The more dangerous the situation is, the calmer you have to be." "Yes, my lord." Prince William nodded, but he could not hide the fear on his face. The king's eyes flashed with disappointment, but he could not be bothered to teach his useless son a lesson. He knew very well that the half-elven kingdom, or more accurately, the House of Medea, had reached a critical moment of life and death. Vera's death in Silvermoon City was a disaster for the House of Medea. It did not matter what conspiracy was behind this, who was the mastermind, or why Prince Tup had suddenly gone crazy. These were no longer important. What was important was that the Duke of St. Hilda needed someone to vent his anger. And the king did not want it to be the House of Medea. Therefore, he had to take measures as soon as possible to divert this disaster that could destroy the House of Medea. As for who to blame for this disaster, the king's eyes flashed fiercely as he ordered Prince William, "Listen carefully. Listen carefully. There are 5 things you need to do now. First, send someone to keep an eye on the Miller family. Miller. Don't let anyone escape. Also, arrange for the Duke Muller to meet me tomorrow morning. Second, you personally go to see the emissary of the Eastern Region's St. Poulos family. Tell them to come see me tomorrow morning, but don't tell them what happened in the Queen's bedroom. Third, immediately send someone to seal up the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. Yes, the Chamber of Commerce I asked you to investigate. Put the person in charge under control. Fourth, send someone to keep an eye on Viscount Angley and his men. Forbid them from leaving the palace or sending any messages to the outside world. Fifth, cough cough." The king spoke so quickly that he choked on his next piece. Prince William hurriedly picked up a cup of water and handed it over. The king drank a few mouthfuls of water and calmed himself down before continuing, "Fifth, put the entire city under martial law. No one is to leave Silverymoon City without my orders. Not just people, but also carrier pigeons. Go find your uncle and have him arrange for rangers to guard the city walls. Kill any carrier pigeons that fly out of the city." "Yes." Prince William nodded decisively. The old king's orders made him feel much more at ease. Just as he was about to carry out his orders, Prince William suddenly thought of someone and asked, "Father, Queen Aisha is also a member of the Miller family. Should we send someone to keep an eye on her?" "Nonsense, of course." The king was about to scold him when he heard such a stupid question, but suddenly thought of something. He rolled his eyes and said, "Go and have her come to see me now." "Yes." Prince William did not dare to say anything more and hurriedly took his leave. The palace quieted down, leaving only the king's slightly hurried breathing. He lay on the bed and looked at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling, deep in thought. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something and a flush suddenly appeared on his cheeks, but it quickly faded. He coughed lightly and muttered, "Duke of St. Hilda. You are really ruthless." Tap tap tap, the crisp sound of footsteps could be heard outside the palace. Not long after, Queen Aisha walked in. She had just finished bathing and changed into a bright red dress, which was a stark contrast to her snow-white skin. Her beautiful cheeks were smeared with light makeup, and her bright eyes shone with a moving radiance. Her expression was gentle and virtuous, but it hid an unconcealable charm. However, in such a tense atmosphere, Queen Aisha's charm seemed out of place. The king looked at the beautiful queen consort in front of him, and an indescribable anger and brutality surged in his heart. However, he forcibly suppressed it. "Aisha, cough cough, I haven't seen you in a long time. You are so beautiful." Queen Aisha came to the bed and looked down at the old king who was on the verge of death, as if he would return to the God of Light's embrace in the next second. Her face revealed a mocking smile. "Your Majesty, have you seen a caged bird?" The king did not understand and hummed a few times. Queen Aisha smiled even more charmingly. "A caged bird's happiest moment is when the cage is turned into ashes." So, you hate me that much, Your Majesty, you must be joking. Why would I hate you? Then, can you tell me, what exactly happened in your palace today? What happened? Didn't I say it clearly in front of everyone? Cough, cough, cough. The old king suddenly coughed violently, and his breathless appearance made people worry that he would not be able to catch his breath and would die. However, Queen Aisha looked at the old king calmly, and did not even have the intention to help pat his back. After a while, the old king finally caught his breath and said in a weak voice, "Can't you cough, cough. Let me, a dying man, die with understanding?" Queen Aisha was completely unmoved and chuckled. "Your Majesty, you will live a long life. How can you be a dying man?" Seeing that it was useless to pretend to be dead, the old king gave up. "Aisha, do you know that if the Duke of St. Hilda blames someone, the first to bear the brunt of it will definitely be the Miller family?" So, Queen Aisha's nonchalant expression hurt the old king. It was as if he had punched the air, and it was so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. "If there is nothing else, I will take my leave first." The old king's expression became extremely gloomy, and he growled unwillingly, "Aisha, no matter what that person promised you, you must think clearly about what your true foundation is. Don't find out in the end that you have no value at all and be casually abandoned." Queen Aisha smiled charmingly and deliberately shrugged her right shoulder, letting the slender shoulder strap slide down, revealing a faintly discernible snow-white skin. "How can I have no value?" After saying that, she smiled and turned to leave, leaving behind the old king who had been teased until he was full of anger but unable to do anything. Chapter 114. Knock, knock, knock. Colin opened the door and saw a guard of the House of St. Hilda standing outside. After seeing Colin, he immediately reported loudly, "Sir, the palace is under the control of the Silvermoon Guard. We are not allowed to leave." Sure enough, Colin was not surprised. The House of Media must be blocking the news now to give them enough time to deal with the situation. When the guard saw that Colin did not speak, a bloodthirsty light appeared in his eyes. He growled, "Sir, why don't we fight our way out? How many people do you have? Can you fight your way out of Silvermoon City? We can give it a try. Even death will not stop us from moving forward." The loyalty and bravery of these guards amazed Colin, but he still shook his head. "No, don't make unnecessary sacrifices. It is more useful for you to stay here. I will think of a way to pass the message. You just need to guard this place." "Yes. By the way, have the Knights of Telda woken up yet?" Just as the guard was about to shake his head, someone behind him reported, "Sir, the Knights of Telda are here." Colin nodded and motioned for the guard to leave. "Sir Viscounts, what happened?" The Knights of Telda rushed over. Their footsteps were a little weak, and their faces were very pale. Colin gritted his teeth and asked, "Don't you remember what happened?" I only remember that there was a problem with the tea, and then I fainted." The Knights of Telda lowered their heads in shame. "Okay, then I will tell you what happened." Colin's eyes turned red instantly, as if he was trying to suppress the anger in his heart. "Miss Vera was killed by a tup." "What?" The Knights of Telda suddenly raised their heads and looked at Colin in disbelief. However, Colin's solemn and painful expression told him that all of this was true. At this time, he finally reacted. No wonder the guards of the House of St. Hilda had such expressions on their faces along the way. No wonder the atmosphere in the palace was so heavy and tense. No wonder the surrounding Silvermoon Guard soldiers were looking at him so warily. Vera. Miss, she. At this moment, the Knights of Telda felt as if the sky was falling down on them. Colin carefully observed the expressions of the Knights of Telda, trying to determine if their shock was real or fake. Now, it seemed that this knight of the House of St. Hilda was really scared silly. Colin had speculated that the Knights of Telda might be the Duke of St. Hilda's backup assassins. If Queen Aisha's assassination failed, this knight could serve as double insurance. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. In fact, it made sense when he thought about it. The Knights of Telda would never become Vera's murderer. This was because if Vera really died in the hands of the Knights of Telda, Marquis Garcia would definitely betray them immediately and lead the Black Cavalry to Coldwinter City. Therefore, the Duke of St. Hilda would definitely not be so unwise. On the contrary, Queen Aisha was an excellent scapegoat. The crazy Marquis Garcia would immediately lead the Black Cavalry to Silvermoon City without the Duke of St. Hilda's orders. Then I'll kill Tup. The Knights of Telda roared. Tup is already dead. Then I'll go and destroy the Miller family. Looking at the murderous knight in front of him, Colin suddenly had a headache. Don't you think before you brag? How are you going to kill him? I don't think we will be able to get out of the palace with so few of us. Fight for the oath and die for honor. This is my creed as a knight. Colin had a headache and he had to change his way of persuading him. I know that you are not afraid of death, but you can't die in vain. What's more, how can the Miller family be enough? I want the House of Medea and all the half-elf nobles to be buried with Miss Vera. So, you have to wait patiently for the moment when the army of the North arrives. So, are we not going to do anything now? No, I want you to stay here and prevent the House of Medea from acting out of desperation. It doesn't matter if we die, but we must not let them taint Miss Vera's body. The Knights of Telda finally calmed down and they seemed to agree with Colin's reasoning. After sending the stubborn knight away, Colin walked back to his room. After closing the door, he took a deep breath and found a beautiful girl standing in front of him. She was looking at him curiously. Colin, what are you doing? Shoo. Colin quickly stepped forward and covered Vera's mouth. Keep your voice down. Vera was shocked by Colin's action but she did not move away. Although she was confused, she still nodded obediently. She trusted Colin very much. Colin let go of his hand and looked at Vera who was blushing. What questions do you have? Ask me now. I have a lot of questions. What happened in Queen Consort's bedroom? Why was I in your room when I woke up? Why are my clothes covered in blood? And what happened to the coffin? Don't worry, one by one. Colin held Vera's hand and led her to sit down at the round table. Then, he told Vera about the confession that he and Queen Aisha had made. In short, he pushed all the blame to Tup. As for why Tup wanted to kill Vera, perhaps he was just a lunatic. Of course, this set of excuses was very unreasonable. If Prince Tup had not rushed out of the bedroom and chased after Queen Consort with a sword in front of everyone, perhaps no one would have believed it at all. However, it was precisely because of that scene that this set of excuses was able to get away with. Moreover, Tup was now dead. There was no proof. So, what I have to do now is to continue to pretend to be dead. Vera obviously believed Colin's excuse. Yes. Before the army of the North arrives at Silvermoon City, you have to pretend to be dead. Okay. Vera nodded obediently. When she saw the blood all over her body, she suddenly felt a little wronged. So, I can't change out of this set of clothes? No. Colin said firmly. However, when he saw the girl's big watery eyes, he took a step back. Of course, you can take a shower and change out of the underwear. Okay. Vera was happy. Then, she pointed at the coffin in the room and asked, Is that coffin also prepared for me? Yes. Am I going to sleep in that coffin tonight? Vera asked with a little fear on her face. Colin immediately waved his hand generously. Of course not. You can sleep on the bed tonight and I will sleep in the coffin. After saying that, Colin suddenly realized something. A vampire sleeping in a coffin. What's going on? Why does it seem like a good match? Maybe he could really try sleeping in a coffin. Maybe he would discover something new. Just as Colin's imagination was running wild, Vera revealed a bashful expression. She lowered her head and spoke in a mosquito-like voice. Why do you want to sleep in a coffin? Can't you sleep in a bed? Colin's eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. Okay. Then, let's sleep on the bed together. As for the idea of trying to sleep in a coffin to see if he could discover anything new, he had already forgotten about it. How could a coffin have the fragrance of a beautiful girl? It is getting late. Why don't we go to bed early? I have to take a shower first. Then, let's take a shower together. Bah! Chapter 115. The next day. The bleak autumn wind blew dust into the air and enveloped the entire Silvermoon City, making it look even more gloomy. This garden city that had been immersed in a festive atmosphere had become gloomy after just one day. Although the tragedy in Queen Aisha's palace had only spread among the half-elf nobles, the commoners in the city could also feel the tense and oppressive situation. After all, the tightly shut city gates, the order to forbid entry and exit, and the patrolling soldiers on the streets all indicated that something big had happened in Silvermoon City. At 8 in the morning, Duke Muller, who had not slept the entire night, followed Prince William to the main hall of the palace. To be honest, Duke Muller had heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that the king had summoned him. From his point of view, as long as the king was willing to see him, it meant that the Miller family had not been completely abandoned, and there was still a glimmer of hope. The Miller family, who had just suffered an unprecedented crisis, could not wait to grab onto any life-saving straw. Good morning, Your Majesty. Duke Muller placed his hand on his chest and bowed, trying his best to appear as natural as usual. However, the dark circles under his eyes and messy hair had already revealed the fear and weakness in his heart. Good morning, Duke Muller. The old king leaned on his scepter and stood on the high platform in the main hall, looking at his old subject from afar. The old king actually thought highly of Duke Muller. Otherwise, he would not have given him the position of Prime Minister of the Half-Elf Kingdom. Duke Muller did not disappoint the old king. In the 10 years that he had been Prime Minister, he had done a good job, managing the Half-Elf Kingdom well. When the king had married Aisha Miller as queen consort, it had actually been to rope in this capable prime minister and make plans for his next generation. Otherwise, there would have been no need for him to marry Aisha. Of course, Aisha was beautiful, but he was already over 70 years old. No matter how beautiful she was, he could only look at her. What was the point? Moreover, from the first day Aisha entered the palace, the old king could tell that she hated him. No matter how she tried to disguise herself, she could not escape the old king's sharp eyes. The old king didn't care too much about this. In his opinion, such a beautiful young lady was forced by her father to marry a dying old man. How could she not be angry? However, he had never imagined that this resentment would bring such a disaster to himself and the House of Media. Yes, although he did not manage to get anything out of Queen Aisha last night, the old king still firmly believed that this woman was lying. What happened in Queen Consort's bedroom was definitely not that simple. This was the intuition of an old politician who had been in the treacherous political world all his life. He had no evidence, but he didn't talk about evidence either. Didn't sleep well last night? It's all right. When one gets old and experiences many things, it's easy for one to not be able to sleep. The old king's unhurried attitude puzzled Duke Muller. Under such circumstances, he still had the mood to chat. However, it seemed that the old king was here to chat with Duke Muller. I remember you told me that you have 2 sons, right? Yes. Grandson? There is one. How old is he? Just a month old. Just a month old. The old king slowly walked down the platform and approached Duke Muller. He said pointedly, not many people know such a young child, right? Duke Muller looked up abruptly, as if he understood the old king's meaning. His lips trembled slightly, and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. It seemed to be pain, hatred, and gratitude. After a while, Duke Muller replied, Of course, he is a child after all. He has not met many people. The old king nodded and sighed. Yes. And children grow up quickly. They change every day. Even if someone saw them when they were young, after a year or two, no one would be able to recognize them. At this point, Duke Muller naturally understood the old king's meaning. Obviously, the old king was telling him that the Miller family could no longer be saved, but he could help him keep a bloodline, Duke Muller's 1-month-old grandson. Duke Muller's face was covered in tears, and his whole body began to tremble. He did not know if it was out of fear or gratitude. Your Majesty. Thank you, for everything you have done for the Miller family. The old king reached out and patted Duke Muller's shoulder twice. I hope you do not resent me, he said softly. I will not resent you. Duke Muller smiled sadly. This is the fate of us half-elves. Being sandwiched between giants, it is inevitable that we will be crushed to pieces. The old king sighed, as if he deeply agreed with Duke Muller's words. He leaned close to Duke Muller's ear and whispered, Rest in peace. I will send someone to replace your grandson. Duke Muller nodded and looked at the old king one last time. Then, he unsheathed his sword without hesitation. But at this moment, the old king raised his hand to stop Duke Muller. Your Majesty, do you have any other orders? The old king reached out his right hand and said coldly, You are my knight. If you want to die, you should die by my hands. Duke Muller was stunned, but still handed the sword to the old king. Then, he closed his eyes. Chi! The sword pierced through his chest. Outside the hall, Prince William was accompanying Saint Prospero and his sister. Your Highness, when will His Majesty see us? We have been waiting for so long. Anna asked impatiently as she picked up a pebble on the ground. It should be soon. Prince William hurriedly explained with a smile, Father is currently meeting with Duke Muller. You will be next. The Earl of Avon was still drinking wine, minding his own business. Hearing this, he suddenly asked, Your Highness, what happened yesterday? Are you still unwilling to tell us? Prince William laughed and waved his hand, this. When you see His Majesty, you will naturally know. Okay. The Earl of Avon did not mind, and picked up the wineskin and poured more wine into his mouth. After a long time, a guard hurriedly ran to Prince William's ear and whispered a few words. Then, Prince William invited Saint Prospero and his sister, His Majesty can see you now, please. The Earl of Avon and Anna immediately strode forward into the hall. Prince William, don't you want to go in with us? The Earl of Avon suddenly turned around and asked. I won't go. His Majesty only said that he wants to see you. Okay. The two siblings did not suspect anything and walked into the hall. However, the hall was empty, and there was not a single person in sight. Your Majesty. The Earl of Avon tried to call out, but only heard his own voice echo. Anna wrinkled her nose and asked in surprise, Why is there the smell of blood? The smell of blood? The Earl of Avon suddenly felt a chill and realized that something was wrong. It's in that direction. Anna walked deeper into the hall. After taking a few steps forward, they were shocked to find a bloody corpse lying on the ground, with a long sword in its chest. Because their line of sight was blocked by the pillars in the hall, they were not immediately discovered by the siblings. Not good. Let's go. The Earl of Avon quickly grabbed his sister's arm and ran out of the hall. What's wrong, brother? Anna was still in a daze. This is a trap. The Earl of Avon noticed that Prince William was stunned and he smiled proudly. Then, he said in a tempting tone, Your Royal Highness, if Miss Vera is really dead, then you can't arrest us. At this time, the Eastern region is the only thing you can rely on. Prince William seemed to have become a puppet and he did not respond to the Earl of Avon. "Your Royal Highness, I have a way to help you solve your current problem." "Really?" "As long as you take us to see His Majesty the King." Prince William felt that the Earl of the Eastern region was really noisy. He waved at the guards and motioned them to speed up. "Your Royal Highness. Your Royal Highness. Believe me, I am the only one who can help you now. You go and tell His Majesty that I have a way to stop the northern frontier from sending troops." When the St. Prospero siblings were taken out of the hall, Prince William was still thinking about the last words of the Earl of Avon. Does he really have a way? Just as Prince William was stunned, the old king appeared behind him. "Do you really think he has a way to help us?" "Father." Prince William hesitated but he decided to answer truthfully, "I think we can listen to the Earl of Avon's advice. Maybe he really has a way." "Idiot." The old king interrupted without hesitation, "If you really want to listen to his advice, then you have fallen into his trap." Prince William lowered his head and did not dare to speak. The old king sighed and explained, "You must be careful when dealing with such a smart person. Especially when the other party tells you that he can help you. Every time this happens, you have to stop and think carefully about whether your position is the same as his position. If not, then don't listen to him. Otherwise, sooner or later, you will be betrayed by him without knowing it." "Yes, father." Prince William nodded again and again. When he saw that his father's anger had subsided, he asked carefully, "What should we do with the siblings?" "Lock them up first. Don't neglect their meals and drinks, but don't let them have any contact with the outside world." "Yes." Clang. The heavy iron door fell, completely isolating the St. Prospero siblings from the outside world. The Earl of Avon looked around his cell and nodded with a smile. "The environment is not bad. Other than the lack of windows, everything is quite complete." Anna looked at her brother's calm face and could not remain calm. "Hurry up and think of a way, brother. Are we just going to wait for death here?" Don't be afraid. The House of Medea won't dare to kill us." "Then why do they want to lock us up?" "Bargaining chips." "What bargaining chips?" The Earl of Avon sat down at the round table and sniffed the water bottle. He was disappointed when he found that it was not wine. After pouring a glass of water for himself and his sister, the Earl said calmly, "Do you remember that I told you before that the Duke of St. Hilda has a winning strategy?" "Yes, it is to let Vera die in Silvermoon City." "Could it be that? You guessed it right." "I think so." "Then what does this have to do with catching the both of us?" "Don't worry, listen to me slowly." The Earl of Avon took a sip of water and said, "Although I guessed that Vera would die in Silvermoon City, I did not guess the murderer." "The murderer who killed Vera?" "Yes." The Earl of Avon's eyes flashed with a strange light. Anna, who was familiar with her brother, knew very well that the Earl of Avon was excited. This was the kind of excitement one would get when they met their match. The Earl of Avon was indeed very excited, as if he had found a fun game. "I thought that the Duke of St. Hilda would send someone from the wedding procession to kill Vera, such as Viscount Angley or some other hidden assassin. After all, this was the easiest way to arrange. However, I did not expect that the Duke of St. Hilda would actually find someone from the Miller family to be the murderer. How did he do it? It was too clever. In this way, not only did he successfully find an excuse to send troops to Silvermoon City, but he also completely cleared himself of suspicion. It would be difficult for everyone to suspect that the Duke of St. Hilda was the mastermind behind the scenes. This shows that the Duke of St. Hilda has been plotting against the half-elf kingdom for a long time." The eastern region did not lose in vain. Anna was at a loss as she listened. "How do you know that the murderer is from the Miller family?" Chapter 117. Isn't it obvious? The Earl of Avon spread his hands, as if he felt that there was no need to explain. "The Duke Muller was killed and his body was thrown there as a prop to frame us. Doesn't this mean that the Miller family has been completely abandoned? Why were they abandoned? Obviously, it's because someone from the Miller family killed Vera. Anna nodded, but she was still puzzled. Why would the Miller family kill Vera? Were they bribed by the Duke of St. Hilda? This is why I admire the Duke of St. Hilda. The Earl of Avon's eyes flashed with a strange light again. You have to know that the murderer of the Miller family risked his life to help the Duke of St. Hilda. So, you can't guess why the Miller family would help the Duke of St. Hilda? How can I guess? The Earl of Avon shook his head and said helplessly, I'm not a god. Then, what does this have to do with us? You still haven't said why the king wants to arrest us. The Earl of Avon laughed. Think about it. Since Vera has died in Silvermoon City, the army of the north has an excuse to send troops. So, what should the House of Medea do? Anna thought for a while, and then she said, they definitely can't stop the army of the north from entering Silvermoon City. So, they can only find a scapegoat to bear the anger of the Duke of St. Hilda. That's right. The Earl of Avon snapped his fingers and nodded. First of all, the Miller family is definitely doomed. No matter who the murderer is, this family must be destroyed. The blood of the House of St. Hilda is not that easy to stain. However, the Duke of St. Hilda's anger might not be completely extinguished by the Miller family. This was especially true for the House of Medea. Since Vera had died in the half-elven palace, they would definitely have to bear some responsibility. If I were the Duke of St. Hilda, I would definitely use this opportunity to remove the royal status of the House of Medea and replace it with a half-elf noble as the master of Silvermoon City. This way, the new royal family would have to rely on the power of the House of St. Hilda to control the half-elven kingdom, unlike the House of Medea, which constantly wavered between the eastern and northern frontier to please both sides. Therefore, in order to prevent this from happening, the House of Medea had to find a way to save itself. And the best way to save himself was to tell the Duke of St. Hilda that he was determined to break with the eastern region. This way, the Duke of St. Hilda would not have to look for a new puppet to help him rule the half-elven kingdom. So that's how it is. Anna suddenly understood, so, the two of us are the bargaining chips for the House of Medea to break with the eastern region. Yes, as long as they capture us and hand us over to the Duke of St. Hilda, the House of Medea would have completely offended the House of St. Prospero. They could only follow the path of the northern frontier to the end. Anna nodded, but then she seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly, her face changed and she hurriedly said, then, in order to show their loyalty to the Duke of St. Hilda, will the House of Medea kill us? Count Elvin froze for a moment before chuckling. My silly sister. How could the House of Medea have the guts to do so? Once they are stained with the blood of the House of St. Prospero, it will be an endless hatred. How could a small half-elven royal family have the guts to offend the Holy Knight family of the Empire? If they really dare to do so, the House of Medea will immediately become the public enemy of the Radiant Empire. Even the Duke of St. Hilda will not protect them. Anna sighed in relief, sat down at the round table, and took a sip of water. So, we're just going to wait here? Yes, we're going to wait. I've already told you that our trip to Silvermoon City is destined to be in vain. Sigh, it's a pity that there's no good wine here. At this point, the Earl of Avon stood up and slammed the thick iron door, shouting, Hey! Those outside, can you send in some wine? Anna looked at her unreliable brother and silently rolled her eyes. Outside Silvermoon City, an army of about 1,000 people was moving quickly. Hurry up, all of you start running. If we don't reach Silvermoon City before the sun sets, I'll have to sleep in the suburbs with you all again. The Knight of Rigo's loud voice kept ringing, and he seemed to be in a bad mood. After parting at Winter City, he followed Colin's orders and returned to Ice Stone City to lead 1,000 people to meet up with Colin in Silvermoon City. However, on the way back to Ice Stone City, he was harassed by a few bandit groups for a long time, which was why he was delayed until now. Usually, As long as he flashed the roaring white bear flag, normal bandit groups would definitely not dare to attack a noble's army. However, for some reason, the bandit groups seemed to have collectively gone crazy this time, making it extremely difficult for the Knight of Rigo to return to Ice Stone City. What he didn't know was that these bandit groups were also so hungry that they had no choice. The invasion of trolls this spring caused a large amount of fertile land in the northern frontier to be wasted. The spring plowing was delayed, and the autumn harvest was naturally not good. Therefore, the northern frontier was destined to have a difficult winter this year. The bandit groups were even crazier because of this. The nobles' guards that they usually avoided were now even more daring. In short, after the Knight of Rigo returned to Ice Stone City with difficulty, he realized that he had been delayed for too long. He was afraid that he might not be able to reach Silvermoon City before Vera's wedding. Burning with anxiety, he naturally found Knight Xiaer and wanted to take the cavalry with him. Because. Colin scratched his head and spouted nonsense. Because blood is the essence of life, and it contains many beneficial substances. So that's how it is. I remember seeing my father drink bear blood when I was young. Vera suddenly realized that the Angeli family's emblem was a white bear. She quickly apologized. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Colin waved his hand. It's okay, I'm not that sensitive. In fact, he had wanted to change the emblem for a long time. Roaring white bear. At first glance, it was obvious that the Angeli family was not elegant at all. Then, is the deer blood wine enough for you? Don't you need to eat something else? I don't need it, you can eat. Currently, Vera was pretending to be dead, so the food that was sent in was naturally only enough for one person. Therefore, Colin gave the food to Vera. But I can't eat so much. You should eat some too. Vera pushed the half-eaten plate in front of Colin and persuaded him with a smile. Colin knew that she meant well. Although he did not need to eat ordinary food, in order to make Vera feel at ease, he obediently stuffed the rest of the food into his stomach. Are we going to wait for the army from the northern frontier to arrive at Silvermoon City? Yes. But the House of Medea has sealed off Silvermoon City. We can't send any news back to Winter City, right? Are they going to seal it off forever? Colin said disdainfully. Besides, no news is actually a kind of news. Vera suddenly realized, that's right. If father doesn't receive any news of my marriage, he will definitely know that something has happened to Silvermoon City. Colin nodded in agreement. Even though he actually meant something else. In fact, the current development of Silvermoon City did not really satisfy Colin. According to the current script, even if the army of the north arrived at Silvermoon City, the House of Medea would still have a way to secure the throne. The Miller family would probably become the scapegoat. The crime of killing Vera was enough to make the family disappear from the world completely. However, this was obviously not in Colin's interest. First of all, Queen Aisha was also a member of the Miller family. Colin did not want to see his second blood descendant be abolished. Moreover, Colin did not want the half-elf kingdom to fall into the control of the House of St. Hilda. This rich but weak small kingdom had already aroused Colin's greed. He wanted to control this kingdom personally. Moreover, Colin now had an excellent chess piece, Queen Aisha. It would be a waste if he did not make good use of it. As long as he could control the half-elf kingdom, Colin would not have to worry about the cavalry's military expenses anymore. Perhaps I should encourage a certain ambitious person. Colin whispered to himself. What? Vera was just about to ask what Colin said when she heard someone knocking on the door. Colin quickly carried Vera and placed her into the coffin. Then, he slowly opened the door and let the half-elf female slave Kathy in. Sir Viscounts, have you finished your meal? Yes, you can clean up. Yes. Looking at Kathy, who was lowering her head to clean up the table, Colin suddenly said, "You should have a way to contact the people outside the palace, right?" Kathy looked at Colin carefully and hesitated for a moment. However, she did not dare to speak. "Don't be afraid. We are now in the same boat." Colin smiled. Then, regardless of whether Kathy believed him or not, he continued speaking. "I know that the Savoy family wants to regain the half-elf throne. It is indeed a good idea to let Vera die in the palace. The House of Medea is very likely to be abolished under the wrath of the northern frontier. However, the House of Medea is obviously not going to sit still and wait for their doom. Do you want to know what they are going to do?" Kathy's hands trembled and there was a flash of hesitation on her face. After a while, she finally raised her head and looked at Colin. There was no longer any trace of fear in her eyes. She straightened her chest and it seemed as though she did not want to show her fear in front of Colin. However, her young and inexperienced face and simple clothes made her seem a little lacking in confidence. "Sir Viscounts, may I know what news you have received?" Colin smiled and said, "Why? Have you admitted your identity?" Kathy pursed her lips and did not speak. "It's fine if you don't want to admit it. However, I can't give you my news for free. May I know what you want?" "I want to know if there is an army of the Angeli family outside Silvermoon City right now." Kathy frowned and said, "I am sorry, sir. Silvermoon City is now in lockdown. We cannot contact the outside world. I am not asking you to contact them. I just want you to confirm their existence. Don't tell me that you can't do such a simple thing." "Okay." Kathy finally nodded. "Then, what is the bad news you're talking about?" Colin showed a bright smile and said, "Go and tell Sith that the House of Medea has already imprisoned the messenger of the Eastern region. I guess they want to use this as a bargaining chip to completely turn to the northern frontier. So, if the Savoy family does not do something quickly, the half-elf throne will most likely still belong to the House of Medea. And you will be completely eliminated after you lose your value." Sure enough, after hearing the news, Kathy suddenly opened her eyes wide. Is this true? She obviously did not believe Colin. Colin spread his hands and said, "You can ask Sith to check it out. Don't you have other informants in the palace?" Kathy left in a hurry with an anxious face. Vera poked her head out of the coffin and asked curiously, "Colin, you have been imprisoned here all this time. How do you know that the messenger of the Eastern region has been arrested?" Colin smiled mysteriously. "I naturally have my ways to find out." Chapter 119. The streets of Silverymoon City had become deserted. A middle-aged half-elf pressed down on his hat as he hurriedly walked through the streets filled with fallen leaves. But soon, a group of patrolling guards stopped him. "Name?" "Roth." "What are you doing? Where are you going?" After a routine inspection and questioning, Roth was allowed to leave. He walked around the streets for a long time before finally walking into an inconspicuous tavern. After passing through the noisy main hall, Roth entered the kitchen with great familiarity. He was then led into a hidden basement by a chef. "Brother, Kathy sent an urgent message from the palace." Under the dim candlelight, a half-elf in the basement raised his head. It was Sith from the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. Sith frowned as he took the small piece of paper from Roth. He said unhappily, "The people from the House of Medea are looking for us." Why would she take the risk to send a message? Roth sighed, "It should be very important information. In order to send it out, 3 of our spies in the palace have been killed." Sith's frown deepened, but he still patiently flipped open the piece of paper and took out a book from the bookshelf. After he finished translating the ciphertext on the note, his expression instantly became extremely solemn. "What's wrong?" Roth asked worriedly when he saw his brother's expression change. Sith passed the translated piece of paper to his brother and said seriously, "We have to take action. We can't just sit here and wait. After reading the report, Roth said hesitantly, "Brother, but Mr. Schwa, don't bother about that damned Mr. Schwa." Sith said angrily, "The only person we can rely on now is the Duke of St. Hilda." But Roth still seemed to have some doubts. "Brother, it's not like 300 years ago. Who should we choose between the two of them? Don't tell me you still can't see it clearly." After a long while, Roth seemed to have been convinced by his brother. He nodded, "All right. Then what do you think we should do?" "Make the arrangements. I want to see the Duke of Lute." "You actually dare to come and see me?" The Duke of Lute looked at Sith and sneered. Sith's expression was indifferent as he asked, "Duke, don't you dare to meet me at this time as well?" The Duke of Lute chuckled, "How do you know that I didn't agree to meet you just to lure you out? You should know that Prince William is looking for you all over the city." "Then do you know why His Highness is looking for me?" "I heard that it's because of tax evasion by the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce." "Do you believe this reason?" "Of course not." "What do you think is the reason?" The Duke of Lute sneered and said confidently, "I think it's because of Queen Aisha." "Oh." Sith rolled his eyes, "How much do you know about me and Her Highness Queen Consort?" "Hee, in the name of cultivating blood roses for the Queen, I'm afraid you've done a lot of things." The Duke of Lute revealed a smile that all men understood, "You're really lucky. Queen Aisha, that beautiful rose, actually took a fancy to a lowly commoner like you." Sith was stunned. He originally thought that his secret with Queen Aisha had been seen through by the Duke of Lute, but he didn't expect, "Ha ha ha. Your Excellency the Duke, your eyes are truly sharp." The Duke of Lute had a complacent look as he snorted, "In the palace, there aren't many things that can be hidden from my eyes." Right. Sith suppressed his laughter, "Then are you going to capture me and bring me to His Majesty?" "That'll depend on your performance." The Duke of Lute smiled, "Although your Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce has been seized, I believe that you must have your own little treasury. So, you want money? Also." The Duke of Lute's eyes flashed with a lustful light, "You've been with Queen Aisha for so long, you must have something on her, right? Give it to me. Then, you can use it to blackmail Queen Aisha and get close to her." Sith's eyes were a little strange. The Duke of Lute snorted, as if silently agreeing. Sith couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and sighed, "Duke, you misunderstand. Queen Aisha and I don't have that kind of relationship. However, if you really want to get close to her, I might be able to help you." The Duke of Lute felt that Sith was just being stubborn, but when he heard the last part, he couldn't help but ask, "How can you help?" "I can help you attack the palace. When that happens, all the half-elf beauties in the palace, including Queen Aisha, will be yours." The Duke of Lute glared at him and said angrily, "Are you playing with me?" "I'm serious, Duke." Sith put his hand on his chest and bowed with a serious face. "Ha, you lowly commoner, you dare to play with a noble. Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Faced with the Duke of Lute's threat, Sith actually laughed, "Duke, I'm not a lowly commoner." "What did you say?" "My surname is Savoy." Savoy. Savoy. The Duke of Lute stood up from his seat and looked at Sith in disbelief. Sith also straightened his chest and met the Duke of Lute's gaze without backing down. Then, in order to make the Duke of Lute believe his identity, Sith took out an intricate badge. Golden-winged sparrow. The moment the Duke of Lute saw the badge, he finally confirmed Sith's true identity. He really was the descendant of the previous royal family of the half-elf kingdom, the golden-winged sparrow, Savoy family. No wonder Prince William wanted to capture you so badly. The Duke of Lute suddenly realized. "Duke, now you know that I wasn't lying when I asked you to attack the palace with me." "Humph. Are you crazy? So what if you're from the Savoy family? Do you think that this is 300 years ago? Do you think that just by revealing your identity, you can make me obey your orders?" Wake up, the current royal family of the half-elves is the House of Medea. Sith also laughed. Duke, if you don't do as I say, do you think that the records of our previous interactions will be sent to His Majesty? The Duke of Loot panicked, but he still tried to act tough. Will His Majesty believe you? Why not? Do you know that I have a habit of keeping records? I have a detailed record of every bribe that I have given you in the past. Not only you, but also your clansmen and your loyal subordinates. Maybe you don't realize it, but our Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce has already been deeply entangled with your Loot family. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal, but at this sensitive time, do you think His Majesty will believe in your innocence? Or would he rather kill the wrong person than let you go? The Duke of Loot broke out in cold sweat. Because he knew his brother-in-law too well. He was a cold-blooded and merciless political animal. Once he knew that the relationship between the Loot family and the Savoy family was unclear, the old king would not hesitate to raise his butcher's knife. After a long while, the Duke of Loot said bitterly, "What is your plan?" The corners of Sith's mouth rose slightly, revealing a bloodthirsty smile. Chapter 120. Kathy, who was dressed in a black maid uniform, walked into the room and placed the lunch in front of Colin. Of course, there was also deer blood wine for every meal. After the food was placed on the table, Kathy did not leave as usual. Instead, she stood beside the round table with her hands behind her back. Colin picked up the deer blood wine and poured himself a cup. After taking a sip, he asked Kathy, "What's the matter? What's wrong? Is there any news?" Kathy nodded. "Yes, Sir Viscounts. Your family's army is now at the south gate of Silvermoon City." "Okay, I got it." Colin nodded and continued to drink. Kathy still did not leave. She hesitated for a moment before she said, "Sir, tomorrow night at the Half-Elven Palace, it will be a little dangerous. When the time comes, you can take Miss Vera's body and leave this place temporarily." Colin raised his head and looked at the little maid before he smiled. "I did not expect you to be so considerate of my safety. This is what I should do." "Is that so?" Colin put down the wine glass and grabbed the little maid's collar before he pulled her in front of him. Kathy screamed, but she quickly shut her mouth. Colin smiled coldly. "Do I look like a fool to you?" Kathy quickly shook her head. "Then how dare you use me like this?" Colin's tone was as cold as ice, causing the little maid to tremble in fear. I did not, you did not." Colin sneered. "You used the excuse of my safety to ask me to take Vera's body out of the palace. You wanted me to be your bait to attract the attention of the Silvermoon guards. How dare you play such a small trick in front of me?" "Kathy Savoy, listen to me carefully. You can either tell me your overall plan and I will consider cooperating with you. Otherwise, I will go and look for the old king. I am sure he will be happy to arrange a large number of troops in the palace and wait for you to walk right into his trap. I will talk. I will talk." Kathy was a little girl and she was no match for Colin. She was so scared that she almost cried. Only then did Colin let go of Kathy's collar, picked up the wine glass again, and drank while listening. "Sir Viscounts, the Savoy family has already made the Duke of Loot rebel. However, although the Duke is the commander of the Silvermoon Guards, in fact, he only has absolute control over 2 regiments with a total of 12,000 people. As for the other 3 regiments of the Silvermoon Guards, a total of 18,000 people, they were firmly controlled by the Modwin family. Although we do not have the advantage in terms of numbers, we are still in the dark while the enemy is in the light. If we launch a sudden attack, as long as we successfully attack the palace before the enemy can react and control the old king and Prince William, the House of Media will not be able to do anything. Therefore, in order to make this plan go smoothly, we hope that you can cooperate with us." Colin rubbed his chin as he silently judged the feasibility of the Savoy family's plan. "So, you hope that I can take Vera's body and leave the palace so that I can help you take some of the firepower from the House of Media?" Kathy looked at Colin's face and said carefully, "Yes. After you leave the palace, you can go all the way to the south of the city. I am sure that the army outside the south gate will be there to meet you. Colin smiled and said, tell me the deployment of your troops and the route of your attack on the palace. Kathy had a difficult expression on her face as she said, this. I don't know about this. Colin rolled his eyes and said, then you can ask Sith for it. Without this, don't expect me to cooperate with you. Kathy gritted her teeth and nodded, okay, I will help you ask him now. After that, she hurriedly left. Crack. The coffin lid opened and Vera poked her head out. Colin, are we really leaving the palace tomorrow night? Why? Don't you want to leave? Vera nodded quickly, yes. I can't even change my clothes in here. It is so annoying. That's good. Don't worry, I will arrange everything. Okay, I trust you. There was probably nothing that could stimulate a man's protective instincts more than a girl who trusted him wholeheartedly. Colin had a warm smile on his face as he called out to Vera. Come on, let's eat. The sun set in the west and rose in the east. It was a new day. According to the original plan, today was supposed to be a joyous day. Prince Tup and Miss Vera were getting married today. However, the entire Silvermoon City was shrouded in an extremely depressing atmosphere today. Some people were quietly waiting for the judgment of fate, some were eager to fight, and some were ignorant and thought that this was just a normal day. Knock, knock, knock. Come in. The Knights of Telda pushed the door open and entered the room. They first bowed solemnly to the coffin placed in the middle of the room before bowing slightly to Colin. Lord Viscounts, are you looking for me? Colin waved at the Knights of Telda and waited for them to come closer before he handed them a roll of parchment. What is this? The Knights of Telda looked at the map of the palace with the deployment of the troops and the attack routes. They were suddenly puzzled. Do you know the Savoy family? Yes. They used to be the half-elf royal family. Well, this family is preparing to launch a coup tonight. The map in your hand is the specific arrangement for their attack on the palace. The Knights of Telda was stunned. They did not ask Colin how he had obtained such a confidential map. Instead, they shouted with red eyes, My lord, are we going to take this opportunity to avenge Miss Vera? Colin frowned and asked, Knights of Telda, have you forgotten your biggest responsibility? The Knights of Telda finally calmed down and bowed their heads. I am sorry, Lord Viscounts. I was too impulsive. I should have prioritized protecting Miss Vera's body. Colin nodded. Well, it is good that you understand. The palace is not safe tonight. We cannot continue to stay here. So, we will rush out of the palace after the Savoy family launches the coup. What about after we rush out of the palace? Which direction should we go out of the city? My family's army is now outside the south gate. Okay, I understand. Colin shook his head slowly. No, you don't understand. The Knights of Telda were stunned and looked at Colin in confusion. My family's army is outside the south gate. The House of Medea and the Savoy family will of course think that we will run in the direction of the south gate. So, we must not go to the south gate. The Knights of Telda finally reacted. Then, where should we go? Colin stretched out his finger and pointed at the map. We will go to the north gate. Okay. I will go and prepare the army for tonight's operation. Be careful. Don't attract the attention of the Silvermoon guards. Yes. Colin rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought as he watched the Knights of Telda disappear outside the door. However, he was not worried about tonight's operation. Instead, he was thinking about something else. Last time in Queen Consort's palace, Colin stole a lot of blood from the Knights of Telda while they were unconscious. However, the strange thing was that the blood did not help him to advance to the Fourth Order. However, he did feel that his body was heating up. So, it was not that the blood of the Knights of Telda did not have any effect. It should be that the dosage was not enough. In fact, this was one of the reasons why Colin had to instigate this coup. In addition to creating chaos so that he could take advantage of the chaos to take control of the half-elf kingdom, he also hoped to find the blood of high-level knights in this coup. This should not be difficult. After all, tonight was destined to be a night of bloodshed. Chapter 121. The night was as cold as water, and the silver moon was like a knife. When a dazzling arcane missile pierced the dark night sky, the half-elven palace was instantly in an uproar. If one were to look down from the sky, they would see that the Silvermoon guards, who were originally guarding the east and south gates of the palace, had suddenly turned their spearheads and charged towards the interior of the palace. Under the sudden attack, the two teams did not encounter too many obstacles at all. They were like two fire dragons that rushed out of the inner court of the palace. Here, they finally encountered the organized and tenacious resistance of the guards stationed there. Woo! The harsh sound of the horn echoed above the palace, instantly awakening the entire Silvermoon city. This city of flowers, which was known to have never been captured, could not escape the disaster of the sword. Bang! Colin pushed open the door of the hall, carried the huge coffin, and strode out. At this time, 1,000 guards of the House of St. Hilda had already gathered under the command of the Knights of Telda. Colin glanced around the crowd and said loudly, "Tonight, our only mission is to protect Miss Vera. Protect Miss Vera. Protect Miss Vera." The guards knocked heavily on the armor in front of their chests, and the sound waves reverberated through the sky. Kill! Under Colin's command, the 1,000-man team immediately rushed towards the south gate of the palace. As the Silvermoon guards in this direction had already betrayed them, they did not encounter much resistance along the way. However, after exiting the palace gate, they met a half-elf guard who had come to support the palace. Due to the lag in the transmission of information, the Silvermoon guards on the opposite side did not know what was going on in the palace. They only rushed over when they heard the bugle call for help. At this time, when they met the guards of the House of St. Hilda who were full of murderous intent, they naturally thought that the bugle call was for them, so they decisively drew their swords. Kill! The Knights of Telda roared and led the charge. Although the half-elves had the advantage in numbers, their race was not good at fighting. The so-called Silvermoon Guard was just for show, and had not experienced many cruel battles. How could they compare to the army of the north, which had fought their way out of a war of blood and fire? Moreover, because of Vera's death, St. Hilda's bodyguards could be considered as a mourning army. They had long wanted to cause a bloody storm in Silvermoon City, but they had been suppressed by Colin. Now that Colin had completely let go of the wild beast's noose, the guards of the House of St. Hilda, who were already prepared to die, immediately charged towards the half-elf guards like crazy. As a result, the battle was extremely intense from the beginning. The narrow palace gate instantly turned into a meat grinder. Colin did not participate in the battle. Instead, he stood at the back with the coffin and observed the situation. At the same time, he was constantly looking for the existence of high-level knights among the half-elf soldiers. According to the information provided by Kathy, there were no 5th grade knights in the half-elf kingdom. The highest was only 4th grade. 4th grade was not high. In fact, compared to 3rd grade, 4th grade was qualitatively different. The professions in this world could be divided into 9 grades according to their strength, but every 3 grades was actually a big step. For example, after breaking through 6th grade, one would step into the sanctuary realm. Legend had it that if one broke through 9th grade, one would become a god. Similarly, after breaking through 3rd grade, one would be called a transcendent. At that time, the profession's strength would also undergo a qualitative change. From this name, it could be seen that professions above 3rd grade were no longer considered mortals. Before 3rd grade, there was a slight possibility of challenging someone above their level. However, once they entered 4th grade, there was basically no such thing as a miracle. For mortals below 4th grade, if they wanted to kill a transcendent, there was only one way, using human lives. Professions above 4th grade were not gods. Their energy and strength would also be exhausted. As long as they used human lives to wear down their battle strength, they would naturally be able to win. It was because of this that when Colin discovered that he had secretly drunk the blood of the Knights of Telda, but had not advanced to 4th grade, he was not too surprised. If he wanted to break through to the next stage, he would probably need even more HP. However, after looking around, Colin discovered that there were no 4th grade knights among the half-elf guards in front of him. However, just as Colin was feeling a little disappointed, he suddenly instinctively felt a threat. Without thinking carefully, he hurriedly threw the coffin in his hand forward and rolled on the ground. Kaboom! In an instant, there was a loud sound. The ground where Colin was originally standing was actually blasted open by a golden light. Following that, a huge white figure wearing thick and tight armor, holding a shield in his left hand and a spear in his right hand, charged towards Colin like a tank. Bang bang bang! In the midst of the loud footsteps, the earth seemed to tremble. Colin turned back to look and was instantly scared pale. The other party's beast-like figure completely enveloped him. Without thinking, Colin backhanded his sword and stabbed towards the gap in the armored knight's neck. Clang! The blade of judgment was casually swatted away. Colin was instantly sent flying by the huge force from the sword, crashing heavily into the wall beside the palace gate. However, he did not seem to be seriously injured. He got up without saying anything and ran in the direction of the Knights of Telda. As expected, the difference between 4th grade and 3rd grade was too great. There was no way to fight this battle. Colin ran at full speed, but the armored knight behind him was not slow either. Furthermore, he seemed to know Colin's identity and understood the principle of capturing the ringleader first. He was determined to chase after Colin. Along the way, the guards of the House of St. Hilda hurriedly tried to rescue Colin, but they were all swatted away by the half-elf armored knight like flies. Finally, the Knights of Telda also noticed the situation on Colin's side. They hurriedly abandoned the enemy in front of them and prepared to turn back to rescue him. The half-elf armored knight seemed to have realized that something was wrong and stomped on the ground with both feet. Boom. The ground instantly exploded, and gravel and dirt flew everywhere. The half-elf armored knight turned into a ray of golden light and crashed directly into Colin's back. Poo. Colin felt as if he had been hit by a truck, and he spat out blood. Ding! A spear was pressed against Colin's breastplate. The half-elf armored knight took off his mask, revealing a square and dignified face. Sir Viscount Angley, please ask your subordinates to stop resisting. The House of Medea has no intention to, *tch. A dagger pierced through the gap in the armor and into the side of the half-elf armored knight's waist. He cried out in pain and roared, "You don't know what's good for you." Seeing that Colin did not stop and still wanted to resist, the half-elf armored knight no longer hesitated. The spear in his hand pressed down and pierced through Colin's chest. Sir Viscounts. The Knights of Telda saw this scene and roared as they rushed over. The half-elf armored knight was prepared to break away from Colin and face the Knights of Telda, but he realized that the supposedly dead Viscount Angley under him was suddenly laughing and hugging him. The half-elf armored knight was scared out of his wits. He twisted the spear in his hand like a madman, and at the same time tried to break free from Colin's embrace. However, Colin's hands held on tightly to the half-elf armored knight. "Come on. Play with your life." Chapter 122. Bang! Due to the huge gap in strength, Colin was still thrown to the ground by the half-elf knight. However, because of this moment of delay, he did not have time to deal with the Knights of Telda who were rushing up from behind. Chi! A golden light flashed and a huge bloody wound that was half a meter long appeared on the back of the half-elf knight. His whole body was almost split in half. Ah! He roared and threw the spear in his hand, trying to force the Knights of Telda to retreat. After that, he turned around and ran away. Unfortunately, the guards of the House of Saint Hilda had already surrounded him and blocked his way. In the end, the half-elf knight was still stabbed in the forehead by the Knights of Telda who caught up with him. He knelt down and died. After his death, the half-elf guards who were already at a disadvantage suddenly lost their will to fight and ran away in an instant. Lord Viscounts, are you okay? The Knights of Telda looked at the bloody wound on Colin's chest and their eyes were gloomy. At this time, Colin was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. However, he still raised his hand and pointed at the coffin on the ground. He said weakly, "Protect Miss Vera, out of the city." The Knights of Telda's eyes instantly turned red. They knelt down on one knee and solemnly swore, "Don't worry. I will definitely send Miss Vera's body out of the city, even if the price is my life." Colin seemed to have finally gotten what he wanted. He closed his eyes and kicked his legs. There was no sound. The Knights of Telda and all the soldiers present solemnly bowed to Colin. After that, they lifted the coffin and continued on their way. After everyone left, the battlefield returned to its original calm state. Occasionally, some passers-by would pass by. However, after seeing the tragic situation here, they would stay away. They could not stand the strong smell of blood at all. Under the light of the silver moon, one of the corpses in the pile suddenly moved. Then, the resurrected corpse slowly crawled towards the corpse of the half-elf knight. Gulp! Gulp! A bone-chilling sucking sound rang out quietly, sounding especially eerie and strange in this hellish battlefield. A few foraging black crows landed, but they immediately flapped their wings and flew away quickly, as if there was something extremely terrifying here. Colin was still sucking the blood of the Class 4 half-elf knight. As he absorbed more and more blood, Colin was pleasantly surprised to find that his body was once again showing signs of heat. Moreover, the fever seemed to be particularly obvious this time. It could even be said that it came fiercely, causing him to sweat all over. At the same time, a strong sense of hunger enveloped Colin, making him unable to stop sucking. The half-elf knight's corpse was shriveling at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was likely that he would soon be sucked dry. Colin's stomach quickly swelled, but he still had no intention of stopping. Because he was hungry. The intense spiritual hunger and the increasingly obvious physical satiety were extremely contradictory, but they existed at the same time. Finally, the half-elf knight's corpse was completely shriveled, and not a single drop of blood could be squeezed out. Colin raised his head and heaved a long sigh towards the sky. The heat in his body made him close his eyes comfortably, as if he was enjoying the wonderful feeling of his strength increasing crazily. But soon, this comfortable and wonderful feeling disappeared. Colin was shocked to find that the blood in his body was crazily circulating and boiling. A strange vibrating sound came from Colin's body, as if hundreds of bees were letting out ear-piercing cries. This vibrating sound gradually became unified, and the pitch was also changing. In the end, it finally became a sound similar to a bell. Dang, dang, dang. At this moment, Colin was like a cooked lobster. His skin was flushed red, and it was even covered with small red dots, as if the excessive blood in his body was trying to seep out. Thump! Colin's heart that had long stopped beating actually started beating again. He could not help but clutch his chest. Because the beating just now was so loud, he almost cried out in pain. Thump! Another beat. Ah! Colin finally could not help but let out a low roar. At the same time, he was puzzled. What was going on with him? Was the reaction to advancing to rank 4 so big? Thump! 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 His heart seemed to have suddenly been rejuvenated, beating faster and faster. Colin let out a low roar, no longer caring about what was going on, and no longer suppressing the changes in his body. With the sudden recovery of his heart, the blood in Colin's body started to boil even more violently. The muscles all over his body started to expand due to the blood rush, and even started to be covered with a layer of blood-red lines. It was like some kind of scale armor, full of a mysterious aura. The rising blood pressure made all the blood vessels in Colin's body slowly bulge, like purple steel ropes wrapping around his body. The immense pain made Colin's eyes widen, and his body tremble. Large amounts of sweat seeped out, but it was quickly evaporated by the high temperature on the surface of his body. Thump! Under the intense pain, Colin fiercely punched the ground. His blue veins bulged on his fist as it collided with the ground. Invisible ripples that seemed to have materialized splashed out and spread toward Western Zhou. The ground instantly caved in, revealing a clear fist imprint. Ah! 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 Colin began to throw punches, leaving fist imprints of various sizes on the ground. Large amounts of shock waves spread along the ground, like a small earthquake. Thump thump thump. Colin's heart beat faster and faster, like a powerful pump that did not know fatigue, once again taking over Colin's blood circulation, and pushing it to a terrifying state. Waves of crazily flowing blood rampaged through Colin's body, as if looking for a vent. Colin's body, under the stimulation of the crazily surging blood, actually began to expand. The original armor could not withstand the expansion of the body, and was torn apart. Colin's mind was now in a daze. The whole world in front of him had been covered by a layer of blood-red gauze. Especially the curved silver moon, which was now bright red, as if it was going to drip blood. Countless blood mists floated up from the surrounding corpses, and gathered around Colin's body. Clang! After a dull sound of a bell, the whole world seemed to have quieted down. Colin bent his waist, trembling constantly, as if something was constantly trying to struggle out of his body. Thump! Colin struck the ground one last time, and then quieted down. At this time, his eyes had completely turned scarlet, and there was not a trace of human emotion in them. His exposed skin was covered with mysterious blood-red patterns, and on his back, the muscles there were bulging, like two protruding horns. Chi! The horns bulged, and a pair of black bat wings broke out of his body. The bat wings slowly spread out, extending more than 10 meters to both sides. Colin stood up. At this time, he had turned into a 4-meter-tall giant. The huge bat wings flapped behind him, and a gust of wind swept up. Facing the blood moon in the sky, Colin bared his sharp canine teeth, and suddenly let out a soundless roar. Chapter 123. Outside the south gate of Silvermoon City. When the rebel army began to attack the palace, the Knight of Rigo heard the sounds of fighting coming from the city. Therefore, the loyal knight of the Angeli family did not hesitate to summon the army. Brothers, something has happened in Silvermoon City. Our Grand Duke is still trapped in the city and is facing great danger. So, do you dare to fight with me into the city and rescue our Grand Duke and Miss Vera? Fight into the city. Fight into the city. Fight into the city. The army that the Knight of Rigo brought was basically made up of the veterans of the Angeli family. Therefore, there was no doubt about their loyalty. Moreover, in the face of the legendary weak half-elves, these proud soldiers of the northern frontier would not take the initiative to retreat. That would be too embarrassing. Kill! With a roar, the Knight of Rigo took the lead and rushed towards Silvermoon City. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The half-elven guards on the tower immediately sounded the alarm. Whoosh! The arrows fell sparsely and did not cause much damage to the attackers outside the city. The Knight of Rigo, who was rushing at the front, did not stop. He, who was wearing armor that covered his whole body, looked like an angry bear at this time. His heavy footsteps left a clear and visible mark on the ground. He rushed faster and faster until he was almost like a golden lightning. Bang! Just like that, the beautiful Crystal City gate was smashed into smithereens by him. Night Leg rushed into the city and knocked away a few half-elf guards who didn't care about their lives. He roared, "Let's go! Who dares to stop me?" Half-Elven Palace, main hall. The fierce sound of fighting and the strong smell of blood constantly came from outside the hall, making people feel uneasy. The old king sat high on the throne, not saying a word, his eyes deep and serene. Prince William quickly walked in from outside the hall with blood and traces of fighting on his body. Your Majesty, the situation outside has basically been confirmed. The rebels are under the banner of the Savoy family, and they're participating in 2 regiments of the Silvermoon Guard, and they're under the control of my uncle, the Duke of Lute. As expected, it was the Savoy. The old king's face was filled with helplessness. I knew that they were still hiding in some corner of Silverymoon City. That was why I pretended to be dying of old age to lure them out. Hee, I didn't expect this. They actually chose such a time to jump out. Your Majesty, what should we do now? The old king fell silent for a moment before asking, where are the people from the northern frontier now? When the rebel army charged in, they took the opportunity to rush out of the palace. Send someone to find them immediately. Prince William was a little puzzled. Your Majesty, why do we still care about these northern frontier people at a time like this? Even if they successfully rush out of Silverymoon City, it won't be a big deal, right? The old king gloomily stared at his son and said angrily, if they fall into the hands of the rebel army, or if Vera's body is desecrated by the rebel army, then even if we successfully quell this rebellion, do you think the Duke of St. Hilda will let the House of Medea go? Prince William immediately broke out in cold sweat and quickly nodded. Yes. I'll arrange it now. Wait. The old king stopped his son. Do you know which direction they ran in? Prince William shook his head. I don't know, but I'll send someone to search the city, search my ass. Can you spare so many people now? What about the rebel army in the palace? Prince William opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. The old king sighed and pointed out, didn't the Angeli family's army just arrive outside Silverymoon City a few days ago? Which direction are they in? Yes. Prince William suddenly understood. They are outside the south gate. So, those people from the northern frontier must be running in the direction of the south gate. No, if they are smart, they will definitely not run in the direction of the south gate. So, send someone to chase them in the opposite direction and go to the north gate. Prince William was stunned for a while before he recovered and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll arrange it now. On the other hand, the Knights of Telda were carrying Vera's body all the way to the north. Along the way, they encountered several waves of Silvermoon guards who tried to stop them, but they were all defeated. However, after a series of battles, the House of St. Hilda's guards had also suffered heavy losses. Originally, there were 1,000 guards, but now, only half of them were left, and almost all of them were injured. However, their eyes were still determined, as if no one could stop them from moving forward. Knights of Telda, please wait. Another wave of Silvermoon guards blocked their way. The leading half-elf knight lifted his helmet and persuaded sincerely, His Majesty the King is worried about the safety of Miss Vera's body, and he does not want any of you to be hurt again. So, please follow me back to the palace. I can guarantee that no one will be disturbed. The Knights of Telda were not moved at all. They sneered and said, you guarantee? What can you guarantee? Go back and quell the rebellion first before you talk to me. Now, the House of St. Hilda's guards only want to escort Miss Vera's body out of Silvermoon City. Let's see who dares to stop us. Knights of Telda, His Majesty the King really does not have any malicious intentions. Please believe us, no malicious intentions. The Knights of Telda sneered and interrupted. Then, why did you lock us in the palace and block us from contacting the outside world? This. The half-elf knight was suddenly speechless. The Knights of Telda obviously did not want to talk to the other party. They immediately pulled out their swords and shouted, either you get out of the way or we fight to the death. Make your choice. The half-elf knight looked dignified and did not answer. However, he did not move out of the way. The Knights of Telda obviously understood the other party's intention. They immediately shouted, "Kill!" They immediately took the lead and rushed forward. The two sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle. However, no matter how fierce the battle was, both sides deliberately avoided the place where Vera's coffin was placed. Obviously, the Silvermoon guards also understood the importance of the coffin. They were afraid that they would accidentally affect it during the battle. Therefore, they stayed far away. However, just as the two sides were engaged in a fierce battle, a strong figure suddenly rushed out from the darkness. He was extremely fast and without any hesitation, he rushed towards the coffin in the middle of the battlefield. The Knights of Telda who had been paying attention to the coffin immediately forced the opponent to retreat. He turned around and shouted, "Quick! Stop him! His target is Miss Vera." The half-elf knight who was fighting with the Knights of Telda was also shocked at this time. He shouted almost at the same time, "Stop him!" The two knights who were originally fighting to the death chose to temporarily stop fighting at this time. They rushed towards the coffin in the middle of the battlefield. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. The mysterious knight who suddenly appeared was like a charging tank. He knocked down all the soldiers who were blocking his way and arrived in front of the coffin without any hindrance. Then, without any hesitation, the man decisively drew a golden semicircle with his sword and bombarded Vera's coffin. Bang! With a loud bang, the coffin was torn apart. Countless small wood chips flew everywhere. No! The Knights of Telda and the half-elf knight roared in despair at the same time. However, their expressions immediately froze on their faces. This was because there were only wood chips flying in the middle of the battlefield. There were no bones. That coffin, it was an empty coffin. The half-elf knight immediately reacted and scolded, "We have been fooled. This is bait." The Knights of Telda also looked at the flying wood chips in a daze. It took them a long time to recover. Could this be Viscount Angley's plan? Then, where is Miss Vera at this time? Chapter 125. At the Half-Elven Palace. The massacre was still ongoing. The palace had turned into a sea of blood and fire. The sounds of killing and screams were intertwined to form a hellish sound. However, the side palace where Vera and Colin were originally staying was exceptionally quiet. Under the clear moonlight, a tall and thin figure suddenly appeared outside the side palace. Tap, 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 attracted by the sound of footsteps, a small head quietly poked out from a dark corner. The owner of the small head was none other than Vera. She clenched the staff in her hand and carefully watched the figure who was walking in from outside the palace. When Vera saw the fox mask on the man's face, she walked out from the corner and asked softly, "Excuse me, are you the fox knight that Viscount Angley mentioned?" The fox knight did not speak. After a long time, he nodded stiffly. Vera was relieved and asked again, "Are you the knight of the Angeli family? How should I address you?" The fox knight did not say a word. He just turned around and walked out. Vera was stunned. The other party's cold attitude made her feel a little confused. However, when she thought of Colin's instructions, she quickly followed the fox knight. "Excuse me, where are you taking me?" The fox knight remained silent. Vera pouted and completely gave up on communicating with him. She obediently followed the strange knight out. At this time, the rebel army was concentrating on attacking the inner court of the palace. Therefore, the outer court of the palace was unusually quiet. Occasionally, they could see the palace servants and maids running out in a panic. They were so busy running for their lives that they did not notice the abnormalities of Vera and the fox knight at all. Vera had already changed into the clothes of an ordinary maid. She also touched her face with blood. In such a dark night, it was really difficult to recognize her if one did not look carefully. The two of them walked all the way to the open-air garden in the inner court of the palace. The bloody roses here had already been destroyed by the king's grandson and replaced with other flowers and plants. What are we doing here? Vera finally could not help but ask. However, the fox knight still did not answer. Just as Vera was about to lose her patience with this strange man, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in the room. Miss Vera, good evening. Vera raised her head and saw that Queen Aisha had also appeared in the garden. Gee, good evening, Your Highness Queen Consort. Miss Vera, I have been entrusted by Viscount Angley to escort you out of the palace. This. Vera was a little hesitant. Because Colin didn't tell her what really happened in Queen Consort's palace on the day of the body examination, she always thought that it was Prince Tup who wanted to kill her. As Prince Tup's mother, Queen Aisha was obviously regarded as an untrustworthy person by Vera. Queen Aisha seemed to have expected that Vera would hesitate. Therefore, she took out a badge and showed it to Vera. Roaring White Bear. Vera recognized the badge of the Angeli family at a glance. She no longer doubted Queen Aisha. Do you believe me now? Hurry up and follow me. The palace is not safe. Okay. However, just as Vera was about to leave with Queen Aisha, a team of half-elf guards suddenly blocked the entrance of the garden. Queen Aisha saw the Silvermoon Guard badge on their bodies. Just as she was about to ask them to make way for her, she heard a familiar voice. Miss Vera, Your Highness Queen Consort, where are you going? Sith. Queen Aisha frowned. Why are you here? Then where should I be? Sith laughed. The Duke of Loot is in charge of attacking the palace. However, I have to carry out the orders of the Duke of St. Hilda. I have to kill Vera. Vera was stunned when she heard Sith's words. She had never expected that her adoptive father would want to kill her. What did you say? Father, wants to kill me. Sith looked at Vera with pity in his eyes before he said indifferently, I am sorry, Miss Vera. I am just following orders. No, that is impossible. Vera shook her head in a daze. Sith turned around and looked at Queen Aisha before he sneered, Your Highness Queen Consort, when I found out that Miss Vera had died in the hands of Prince Tup, I knew that you did not carry out the plan that we had set up at the beginning. Therefore, as soon as I entered the palace, I had my eyes on you. Sure enough, you have really betrayed us. Queen Aisha also sneered. Sith, Miss Vera is still alive. Do you still dare to kill her? Do you dare to stain your hands with the blood of a member of the House of St. Hilda? Sith laughed and said with a confident look on his face, Your Highness Queen Consort, Miss Vera had been killed by Prince Tup a long time ago. This is something that all half-elf nobles know about. How could I possibly be the one who killed her? But there are so many people here now. Can you guarantee that none of them will leak the secret? Queen Aisha was still trying to make a final effort. Sith looked around and chuckled, You don't have to worry about such a small problem. I will ask them to go up and kill each of them later. If this is not enough for them to keep the secret, hee. I am sure that they will be very interested in the bodies of the two great beauties. As soon as they heard this sentence, the guards around Sith started breathing heavily. Queen Aisha and Vera's faces instantly turned pale. Kill them. Sith waved his hand and a group of half-elf guards slowly surrounded them. Clang! The Fox Knight was not afraid at all as he pulled out his long sword and stood in front of Vera. Vera also raised the staff in her hand and began to chant softly. Don't let her finish casting the spell. As soon as Sith shouted, the half-elf guards no longer hesitated and rushed forward decisively. Whoosh! At this time, a strong wind suddenly blew in the garden and the sky suddenly darkened. Queen Elsa raised her head in shock and saw a huge figure descending from the sky. A pair of huge black wings completely covered the moonlight and half of the garden was shrouded in its shadow. Bang! The giant landed heavily on the ground and roared angrily at Sith and the others. A boundless and terrifying aura spread out and everyone present could feel a tremor from the depths of their soul. What kind of monster are you? Sith's eyes were wide open and his voice began to tremble. Colin's face was covered by a cloud of blood and coupled with his huge body and black wings, it was no wonder that Sith could not recognize him. All of you must die. Colin roared and waved his huge arm that was covered with hard blood. Bang! 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 The half-elf guards in front of him hurriedly raised their shields, but they were still sent flying by the huge recoil. Sith saw that the situation was not good and he was so scared that he turned around and ran away. Boom! Colin flapped his black wings and a violent airflow instantly filled the entire garden. Under the support of this airflow, he seemed to have turned into a black arrow and in the blink of an eye, he was already above Sith's head. Whoosh! A huge hand suddenly reached down and grabbed Sith's head. Kacha! Sith's head was twisted off on the spot like a bottle cap. Chapter 126. Brother, what's going on outside? In the prison, Anna could hear the faint sounds of killing outside and could not help but ask. The Earl of Avon tilted his head and listened for a while before he wondered, did the army of the North arrive at Silvermoon City so soon? But then he shook his head and said, no. Even if the northern frontier immediately sent troops to the half-elf kingdom after receiving the news of Vera's death, it has only been a few days and they would not be able to reach Silvermoon City. At this time, the heavy iron gate of the prison suddenly opened from the outside. Earl, Miss Anna, please forgive me for being late. Looking at the half-elf knight outside the iron gate, the Earl of Avon smiled and nodded. Knight Omar, you came at the right time. Anna looked at the half-elf knight who was bowing to her brother and suddenly realized that this was probably the house of Saint Prospero's spy in the half-elf kingdom. Knight Omar, can you tell us what happened outside? Of course, Miss Anna. The former half-elf royal family, the Savoy family, has launched a coup. They have instigated the Duke of Lute and a group of Silvermoon guards. At this time, they are attacking the inner court of the palace. It was because of this that I had the opportunity to sneak into the prison and release the two of you. The Savoy family? The Earl of Avon touched his chin and had a strange smile on his face. They really chose a good time to launch a coup. Brother, don't think too much. Let's leave this damn place quickly. Anna urged. Okay, let's go. The three of them quickly left the prison and did not encounter many obstacles along the way. At this time, the House of Medea was already busy with their own affairs and they certainly would not place a heavy guard in the prison. What is that? When the three of them passed by the royal garden, Anna suddenly pointed at the tall figure in the distance and asked. At this time, Colin was like a whirlwind of death, constantly reaping the lives of the half-elf guards who gathered in the royal garden. The Earl of Avon watched for a while and wondered, why does this guy have wings? Is he an elven druid? But didn't the druids go extinct long ago? Anna retorted. It's just a legend. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Who knows if they secretly left behind their legacies? Earl, Miss Anna, Queen Aisha seems to be there too. A sharp-eyed half-elf knight suddenly reminded. Queen Aisha? The Earl of Avon was suddenly interested. Let's go and take a look. Devil, he's a devil. Run. At this time, the half-elf guards in the garden had long been scared out of their wits by Colin's slaughter and were fleeing like a swarm of bees. Bang! Bang! Colin chased after him with heavy steps. Coupled with his huge body and extended black wings, it was really like an eagle chasing after a chick. When the chicks had all scattered, the Earl of Avon and the other two appeared. Looking into Colin's scarlet eyes, Anna could not help but blurt out, "What kind of monster are you?" "You're the freaking monster!" Colin roared. In an instant, he stomped on the ground and flapped his wings. His whole body was like a sharp arrow leaving the bow as he rushed towards Anna. Boom! It was as if a bomb had fallen at the place where Anna had been standing. Countless small pieces of stone flew everywhere. When the dust settled, a huge pit of 2 meters deep could be seen. Anna had already dodged to the side. Although she was holding a huge broadsword in her hand, her body was unexpectedly agile and vigorous. She looked like a butterfly as she moved, which made her look unbalanced and strangely beautiful. Under the stimulation of the holy light, the complicated patterns on the surface of the broadsword began to flicker with dazzling electric light. It was as if there were electric snakes winding around the sword, emitting an extremely dangerous aura. With a hiss, Anna's entire body seemed to have transformed into a silver lightning bolt, and suddenly shot towards Colin. Colin narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He abruptly clenched his fist and gathered all the blood chi around him into his fist, forming an unparalleled fist wind and striking out. Clang! When the fist and the sword met, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. A huge invisible force suddenly erupted, setting off a terrifying wave of air that spread out in all directions. Ci. Bolts of silver lightning shot out from the broadsword like giant pythons, following Colin's fist and quickly climbing up his entire body. Colin only felt waves of numbness, causing the strength in his body to dissipate extremely quickly. Scram! Colin roared. His other hand shot out like a viper towards Anna's face. Anna nimbly dodged and dodged the attack once again. Boom! Colin smashed a large hole in the ground, sending rubble flying everywhere. Colin was unforgiving. He chased after Anna, constantly punching. Bang! 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 For a moment, it was as if he had turned into a demolition machine, smashing all the buildings near the royal garden beyond recognition. Anna could only retreat step by step, looking rather wretched. Miss Anna, I'll help you. Knight Omar roared when he saw the situation. He placed a giant kite shield that was almost as tall as him in front of him and suddenly exerted strength with his feet. Bang! The ground immediately caved in, and Knight Omar used the recoil to quickly charge at Colin. Bang! 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 He charged faster and faster, his footsteps heavier and heavier, and the imprints on the ground became deeper and deeper. By the time he arrived in front of Colin, his entire body had already turned into a golden light. Colin suddenly turned around and punched at Knight Omar's kite shield. Rumble! The fist and the kite shield fiercely collided, bursting out with a loud sound. Such a terrifying head-on collision made Colin unable to help but take 2 steps back before he could stabilize himself. However, Knight Omar was even worse. The kite shield in his hand was completely broken, and a large number of broken pieces of the shield flew in all directions. He was directly sent flying by this terrifying force, crashing into the wall behind him. Pfft! Knight Omar spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was filled with shock. Just as Colin was about to deal with this soft persimmon, Anna rushed up from behind him. Clang! This time, Colin turned around and clamped the other party's broadsword with both hands. The difference in strength made it impossible for Anna to pull out her weapon, but she did not seem to care and let go of the sword hilt. Her small body suddenly lifted up, and she actually soared into the air along with the broadsword. Whoosh! She actually pulled out 2 short swords from her waist and stabbed straight at Colin's eyes. Colin took a deep breath and suddenly opened his mouth. Roar! The deafening roar caused Anna's body to stop. Colin took the opportunity to let go of the broadsword and quickly reached out with his right hand, just in time to grab Anna, who was unable to dodge in midair. Ha! Caught you, little guy. Anna's slender waist was tightly grabbed by Colin with one hand, but she still threw the 2 short swords in her hands at Colin's head. Colin sneered and was about to dodge to the side. But at this moment, a pitch-black smoke suddenly enveloped his head, making him unable to move at all. Chi! The 2 short swords stabbed into Colin's head, as if they had grown 2 horns. Chapter 127. Is she dead? The Earl of Avon put away his staff and asked with a sigh of relief. The second son of the House of St. Prospero was also a mage. However, Anna's face was still serious. She felt that the giant hand holding her waist did not show any signs of loosening. Just as she was about to tell her brother to be careful, the black wings on the giant's back suddenly spread out. The complicated and mysterious blood patterns on his body suddenly emitted a scarlet light, as if some ancient spell formation had been activated at this moment. Ah! Anna screamed in pain because Colin's giant hand did not loosen but tightened instead. Ka-cha! Anna found that more than half of her ribs were broken. Wait! Please wait. The Earl of Avon saw that the situation was not good and quickly shouted, "We are the direct descendants of the House of St. Prospero. Sir, you don't want to be stained with the blood of the Holy Knight family members, do you?" Ka-cha! Anna screamed again as a few more of her ribs were broken. Obviously, the name of the House of St. Prospero was useless. Don't. The Earl of Avon clasped his hands. "We really don't mean to be enemies with you. What will it take for you to let my sister go? Please tell us." Colin stopped squeezing and used his other hand to pull out the short sword from his head while asking, "What can you give me?" The Earl of Avon saw that Leyland pulled out the short sword from his head as if nothing had happened and cursed him in his heart. However, he said with incomparable sincerity, "How about I tell you a secret in exchange for my sister's life? Tell me. You should be a powerful druid, right?" Colin did not answer. The Earl of Avon smiled and continued, "I know where the legendary sacred item of the druids, the wild heart, is. I wonder if this secret is enough to exchange for my sister's life." Druid? Colin was stunned. He didn't expect to be mistaken for a druid in his transformed state. Druid was an exclusive profession of the elves, but it had already died out 10,000 years ago. Even the elves who had retreated to the Radiant Moon Forest no longer had any inheritors of this profession. Legend had it that druids could imitate the forms of various animals and obtain some of the animals' characteristics and powers. Therefore, the pair of bat wings on Colin's back made the other party mistake him for a druid. Colin suddenly felt that there was nothing wrong with this misunderstanding. It was better than treating him as a monster or a devil. Therefore, Colin pretended to be eager and asked, "Then tell me, where is Wild Heart?" The Earl of Avon coughed softly and said, "It's in the arcane city, Yevil." Colin blinked and shook his head. "How do I know that you are not lying to me?" The Earl of Avon seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. He pointed at Vera, who was still hiding in the garden, and said loudly, "You are Miss Vera. I am St. Prospero Evan. Do you still remember me?" Colin raised his eyebrows. This Evan could recognize Vera at a glance. However, he quickly realized that this guy was also a mage. He must have seen Vera in Yevil before. "Hello, Earl of Avon. Of course, I remember you." Vera walked out timidly. Colin's huge and unusual body made her a little scared. "Ha, it is really you. I didn't expect Miss Vera to still be alive. Ha, the situation in Silvermoon City is getting more and more interesting." "Ah!" Anna's scream interrupted the Earl of Avon. No. The Earl of Avon did not dare to delay any longer. He quickly asked Vera, "Miss Vera, you should have heard of the Wild Heart in Yevil Tower, right? It is the treasure of the chairman of the Mage Council." Vera nodded. "Yes. See, I did not lie to you. Can you let my sister go now?" Colin shook his head. To be honest, this news was not useful to him at all. "You want to exchange this news for your sister? It is not the real Wild Heart." "Ha, when did the lives of the direct descendants of the House of St. Prospero become so worthless?" When he heard Colin's words, the Earl of Avon nodded in agreement. Yes. When did the House of St. Prospero become so cheap? What else do you need?" Just tell me. Colin looked at the other party's forthright appearance. He suddenly had the desire to rip off a dog-rich person. Do you have money? Money? The Earl of Avon was stunned. Apparently, he did not expect that the other party would ask for money directly. He reached into his pocket and said helplessly, I did not bring much money with me this time. I guess I only have a few hundred gold coins. Okay. Colin was ready to agree. In fact, he did not really intend to kill the woman of the House of St. Prospero because it would completely anger the eastern region. The House of St. Prospero might even use this as an excuse to send troops to Silvermoon City. This would bring great changes to Colin's plan to control the half-elf kingdom. It was not a wise move to create more problems at this time. No. Unexpectedly, the Earl of Avon shook his head and said with a righteous face. A few hundred gold coins is not worthy of the identity of the House of St. Prospero. Colin. Anna just wanted to punch her unreliable brother to death. How about this, I'll add this staff to the ransom for my sister. What do you think? Colin looked at the huge purple magic crystal embedded at the top of the staff and asked curiously, how much is this staff worth? Probably 100,000 gold coins. Colin's eyes widened. This was the first time he had seen such a prodigal dog. Okay, it's settled. Good, the Earl of Avon immediately threw the staff to Colin, as if he was not afraid that he would go back on his word. Seeing the other party's attitude, Colin didn't want to go back on his word, so he released Anna. Get out of Silvermoon City immediately. If I see the two of you in the city again, I'll twist your heads off. Okay. We'll leave now. The Earl of Avon helped his sister up and pulled Omar, who was paralyzed by the wall, and hurriedly left. After they left, Colin flapped his bat wings and instantly rose into the sky. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the dark night sky. Miss Vera, let's go quickly. Okay. Vera nodded, but she was a little puzzled. Why did that strange man help us? I don't know. Queen Aisha shook her head and lied. In fact, she had already perceived Colin's identity through the mysterious connection that originated from the depths of her bloodline, but she did not tell Vera. So, where are we going now? To the Miller family. The Miller family? Vera hesitated. Queen Aisha smiled and explained, you are now a life-saving straw for the Miller family. As long as you are alive and well, the Miller family will not have to bear the crime of killing you. So, they are now the people in Silvermoon City who do not want you to be hurt the most. Vera was relieved, but when she thought of Colin who had arranged everything, she could not help but ask, what about Colin? Where is he now? Viscount Angeli will join you soon, Lucien said. That's good. Chapter 128. At the north gate of the palace, 3 figures hurriedly walked out. All right, let's take a break. You two are too heavy, I can't help you. The Earl of Avon leaned his sister and Omar against the wall, then he laid down and let out a long sigh. Why did you take the initiative to give the staff to that weirdo? Anna could not help but blame her brother. Such a precious staff, even for the House of St. Prospero, was not something that could be casually discarded. A sly smile appeared on the Earl of Avon's face. That guy is obviously short of money, so after getting my staff, he will definitely find a merchant to exchange it for gold coins. In this way, there will definitely be clues left behind. We can follow the clues to find out which force this guy belongs to. If he is not careful enough, we can even directly find out his true identity. Anna came to a sudden realization. After a while, she asked again, do you really think he is a druid? Isn't he? I think, he is more like a knight. A knight? The Earl of Avon sat up straight with a look of disbelief, are you sure? Anna shook her head, I'm not too sure. However, the energy emitted from his body is indeed holy light, although it has a bloody smell. But, it should be holy light without a doubt. Yes. Sir Earl, I also think that person is a knight. Omar, who was on the side, also interjected. The Earl of Avon really believed it this time. After all, the two knights who had fought with the other party believed that the other party was a knight, so it could not be wrong. A knight. If he is also a druid, then he can only be a half-elf to be able to have both professions. Then is he at the 5th step? The Earl of Avon knew that Anna and Omar were both at the 4th step, but they were beaten up so violently by the other party, so he guessed that the other party should be at the 5th step. Unexpectedly, Anna shook her head again. No. I have fought with the 5th step. I've fought with a 5th step knight before, and this guy's strength shouldn't have reached the 5th step yet. Then why were you beaten up so badly? Anna rolled her eyes and said helplessly, that guy's holy light energy isn't very strong, but it's very strange. It's as if it has some kind of indistinct control over the blood in my body. There were a few times when he disrupted the flow of my blood and chi, and I almost lost my breath. Moreover, this fellow's strength was extremely terrifying. He didn't look like a human at all. Instead, he looked like some kind of giant beast. Also, do you remember my last 2 strikes? I was pretty sure I was in his head. But maybe you put it in a crooked position. After all, his head was shrouded in a bloody mist. That's impossible. Anna said firmly. All right. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's hurry and leave Silvermoon City. If we get caught by that guy again, we'll be in big trouble. Then, our mission, Earl of Avon rolled his eyes and said, my silly sister, you're still thinking about the quest? Our mission is definitely hopeless. But, isn't Vera still alive? Doesn't that mean that we still have hope? Vera is still alive, which means that the other party's methods are much better than I thought. Earl of Avon shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, I was too careless during the last meeting with the king. That's why I was directly locked up by the damn House of Medea. Otherwise, I could still have played with this opponent. But now, the situation in Silvermoon City has been settled, and we are completely hopeless. Let's go, silly sister. The silver moon was high in the sky. Colin watched from afar as Vera and the other two were happily welcomed into the manor by the Miller family. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. Vera should be safe now. If the Miller family wanted to get rid of the misfortune of being exterminated, they had to protect Vera. In addition, Queen Aisha and the blood slave Cynthia were taking care of her, so there shouldn't be any more problems. As for Colin, he still needed to arrange a perfect ending for this coup. Whoosh, whoosh, flapping his huge bat wings, Colin soon returned to the sky above the half-elven palace. At this time, the area around the inner court of the palace had completely turned into a hell on earth. Countless half-elves were as humble as ants, and they could disappear at any time in this political whirlpool. Blood and corpses had become a cruel scene in the palace, and the thick smell of blood filled the air, almost suffocating everyone. Witnessing all this, Colin could only feel the blood in his body getting colder and colder. It's time to end this farce. Colin muttered to himself, then flapped his bat wings and rushed down to the main hall of the inner court of the palace. What is that? A guard heard the sound of the wind above his head, and he looked up in surprise, then saw Colin's figure quickly passing by. Just as he was about to warn his superior, the figure had already turned into a black lightning, fell from the sky, and rushed into the main hall of the palace in an instant. Only then did the guards in front of the hall react. They never thought that the enemy would use such an unbelievable method to rush in. When they hurriedly rushed into the hall to protect the king, they found that the terrifying bat-winged giant was already standing in front of the old king. Prince William held his knight's sword and stood behind Colin, his voice trembling. You. Who are you? What do you want to do? Colin looked at the old king who was standing straight in front of him, and suddenly laughed. "Your Majesty, I didn't expect your body to be so strong." The old king faced this strange person who suddenly rushed in, and did not panic. Instead, he calmly mocked himself, "It's just a small trick, and I wanted to lure out the ambitious schemer as soon as possible. But I didn't expect." "Don't worry, Your Majesty, I've already helped you take care of the rebel leader. Look, is this him?" Colin held up Sith's bloody head in front of the old king. The old king was not afraid, and he stared at the head carefully, then smiled and nodded. "That's right, it's the rat from the Savoy family. After hiding for so long, it's finally quiet." After that, he looked at Colin with a sincere face and said, "Brave warrior, thank you for giving the Modwin family such a great gift. How can I repay you?" Colin nodded. "Yes, I do need a gift in return. Just say it, as long as the House of Medea has it, we will definitely not be stingy." "Of course you have it." Colin laughed a little arrogantly. "I want your head." "What?" The old king was shocked, and thought that he had misheard. But Colin did not give him any time to react. His right hand shot out like lightning, and pressed on the old king's head. Crack. Another bottle cap was unscrewed. "Father! Your Majesty!" The hall was suddenly in chaos. Prince William and the half-elf guards rushed towards Colin like crazy. But Colin spread out his large bat wings, and flapped them forcefully. Boom. Violent air currents rushed through the hall, and Colin crashed through the roof, and flew into the air. A silver moon outlined Colin's figure, and his large wings made him look like an angel who had descended to earth. But his voice was like that of a demon who would destroy the world. "Your king is already dead, run for your lives." Under the shocked gazes of the half-elves, 2 heads fell from the sky. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.